And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. A tough loss last night for the Nashville Predators. They fall 5-2 in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Carolina Hurricanes. We've got a ton of reaction to get to on today's show, and as always, taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Fellas, we got a lot to get to today in terms of the game itself and lineup decisions and all the big talking points that came out of the Game 1 loss last night for the Predators. But, Joe, let's start with you. Just initially, your reaction to the game itself. It's 2-2 heading into the third period. The Predators, I thought, played pretty well in the first period. The second period, I thought it started to shift more toward Carolina. And then in the third period, I thought Carolina was just all over the Predators. They get it done 5-2. What was your reaction to what we saw last night in Game 1?
Yeah, I'd say the Preds played in the second and third about how I sound and feel right now.
It's not good.
But, and I will say, now they did recover in the second period. And, like John Hines said it last night, they were tied. They were tied going to the third. So it was still anyone's game. But then when you come away after the third, to me, it looked a lot like most of the meetings between these teams, which is Carolina. Look, we're going to talk a ton today about what Nashville could have done better and the lineup and all these things. But my number one takeaway is Carolina is freaking good. And they are going to be really hard to beat in a series. And I think, that was a game where you did have an opportunity. You needed some breaks. You needed to finish some earlier opportunities. And it's a tough one. It's a tough one to lose, but it's also, I thought, a little bit of an eyeful of the difference between these teams. There's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and there certainly looked like there was a big difference last night in the final 30 minutes or so of that game. And Joe, one thing that stood out to me, and I was interested to see what this was going to look like once the playoffs came around, and especially after what we saw in the last two games of the regular season, I think it was pretty clear what the Predators were going to try to do in this series, especially when you looked at the lineup they put out there in Game 1, and they were going to try to be the more physical team. They were going to try to muck things up a little bit and make it difficult for Carolina to win some of these puck battles, and they were going to try to use the body. And I thought the one thing that really stood out to me, and I thought was pretty clear from the jump last night, and that was Carolina's not afraid to play that way. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a strength of Carolina's, but they played, a kind of a rough and tumble game last night. And Carolina showed that they're not going to be physically intimidated in this series by the Predators. And I thought that was an important message to send if you're Carolina in Game 1. I thought they handled the physicality pretty well. I didn't think it was an overly physical playoff game. I mean, it had their moments just like a normal playoff game does. But I came away, as quickly as the first period saying, all right, I mean, Carolina, they're equipped to handle things like this. It's not like they just can't handle that physical style of playoff hockey.
Yeah, I totally agree. They and I thought the Preds did exactly what they wanted to do early, and I thought the first period was good. I mean, if the Preds could take that first period and duplicate it over and over again, they would do it in a heartbeat. It was a good, evenly played period. They were physical. They did their thing. I thought, those guys, the Herd line, the new old Herd line did their thing. And I thought Jeannot had some moments on that third line, but like you said, the Canes knew it. They knew it. That's what everybody's been talking about. And it didn't need to be talked about for them to know it. And they came out and I thought really answered that bell as well. And then eventually they got it to the kind of game they want. And the third period was exactly what they want it to be and what Nashville does not want it to be. And it just didn't look like the Preds really could do much about it for most of that third period.
It didn't, and it was funny because, as you said, I mean, they started the game, I thought, pretty well. You get the first goal of the game, Philip Forsberg makes a great play to cut to the middle of the ice, finishes it in a way that only Philip Forsberg can on this team. I thought, Ryan Porth's X Factor, Ryan Johansson, made a great play on that play to set up that goal by Philip Forsberg. I mean, it was a heck of a play by Johansson. He uses his body. He shields off the defender, makes a great kind of wraparound pass to hit Forsberg in the middle, and you're thinking to yourself, well, here they are again. It's the playoff version of the Jofa line, and they're going to look really good. And they had their moments where they looked okay last night, but I still think another level, obviously, that they're going to have to get to be competitive in this series. I thought the Predators got a little stick happy last night with their penalties that they took, whether it was tripping penalties, whether it was hooking penalties, holding, whatever you want to point to in that area. You put Carolina on the power play enough times, eventually that's going to catch up to you. Now, it didn't last night, but conversely, and we'll talk about the lineup and Eli Tolvanen and all that coming up here in just a few minutes, but when the Predators got on the power play, I never once really felt like they were dangerous, and that's something that's going to have to change. If the Predators are going to have any shot to come back in this series, you've got to find a way to mount some opportunities to be dangerous on the power play, and I didn't feel like the Predators last night on the power play were very dangerous at all.
Yeah, well, it's hard to be dangerous if you can't set up, and they didn't do that much. Like their third opportunity, they finally did there, and they had a couple little glimpses of opportunity, but very little. So, I mean, really, if there was one thing you point to that was great for the Preds, the penalty kill stepped up big time. And that is a tough power play to deal with. But like you said, the flip side of that is the power play just didn't look remotely effective. And it's amazing, although again the penalty kill was outstanding. It's amazing when you watch the two teams set up their power plays, because the Canes, and I know, I mean, they are very, very aggressive on the kill. So they are willing to it's not really gamble, but they're willing to be very aggressive and not letting you set up. But it was amazing watching them quickly get it together and then start moving the puck around, and the Preds just not be able to even start. So they've got serious work to do on that front.
Go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Tyler from Berry Hill texting in. So first off, can we talk about how badly Josi played? He made multiple uncharacteristic mistakes and was just mishandling the puck consistently. It's the worst game I've seen from him, and Ryan Ellis continues to get pushed around and lacks a physical presence. It was interesting, Joe, last night, and it happened a couple of times to Josi, I think in the first period, and continued to happen to different guys throughout the game, where you're going to play the puck and you either mishandle it or you flubbed it a little bit. I don't know if it was playoff nerves, a little bit of rust being off for a week, or if the ice was bad. I don't know what was going on with kind of handling the puck last night, but I did notice that with Josi a few times. They got caught out there in a couple of bad moments. I mean, the fourth goal by Carolina, where Jordan Staal just comes crashing in on the forecheck. He gets around Tanner Jeannot. He's all over Ryan Ellis. Ryan Ellis just gets totally pushed off the puck. Jordan Staal takes it. Josi tries to clear it. It goes back to the stick of Staal, and it's in the net, and it's 4-2, and you knew the game was over at that point. I mean, there's certainly going to have to be a higher level of play from Josi and Ellis in this series if you're going to have a chance, and I agree with Tyler. I didn't think either one of those guys was particularly all that good last night.
No, and on the Staal goal, the first Staal goal,
yeah.
And I know that was 4-on-4, and I think Johansson, let it get behind him, but that was a play where if you watch that, and it's very easy to watch anything in slow motion and say, see, this should have happened. I mean, Josi let him split him and Ekholm, and it's still like an incredible shot by Staal there. But that was another play where it's like, Josi, you've got to put the body on somebody and not let that happen.
That first Staal goal felt like Ryan Kessler from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Where he went, remember when Kessler went right through Shea Weber and Shane O'Brien?
Yeah.
And Staal goes right through Josi and Ekholm and then roofs it. Like that was a very impressive play by Stahl.
It was, and that was the one goal that I had a problem with Saros as well. And I get what he's doing there because it's a really tough angle shot, and you can feel somebody coming on the backside. So you're trying to kind of set yourself up to be able to push across and take away that pass and go explosively side to side like we've seen him do so many times during this stretch. But when you kind of cheat like that, and they talked about this on the broadcast a little bit too, when you cheat a little bit like that, you leave some net exposed, and Jordan Stahl made a great decision to shoot that puck. It was a great shot. I don't want to take anything away from Jordan Stahl, but that was one of those situations where I thought UC Saros got caught cheating a little bit on that play.
So of the 4 goals he let in, that'd be the one you have a problem with?
I mean, yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. The first one was, that was unbelievable by Teuvo Teravainen. That's one of the
basketball
best,
bounce pass.
Yeah, it's one of the best redirections I've ever seen in my life. And Crosby did it the day before, so it's happened 2 days in a row. That same kind of play, which is pretty incredible. Look, I don't look at that second goal by Stahl and to go up 2-1 for the Canes and just say, oh, UC Saros has got to have that one. I understand what he's trying to do there, so it's tough to hold all that against him. But yes, like of the 4, that's the one I point to and say, man, just hang on to that post and make sure before you go flying across the crease.
The third goal is the one that the funny thing is, I was all ready to come in here today and say, you know what? Goodbranson's not bad.
Uh-huh.
And
then the third goal happened.
Yeah, that was bad. It was just a bad play. I kind of after the game last night, I went and took a look at it, and you've got Ben Harper trying to pinch up and close it down at the blue line. That went very poorly. He just got absolutely smoked on the outside. Goodbranson's late coming over to take away the pass, so he doesn't take away the shot, and he doesn't take away the pass, so he's just kind of sitting there in no man's land. And somehow Saros makes the incredible save on that play, and then you've got literally 5 Predators watching the puck behind the net, and Niederreiter's just wide open. There's nothing Saros can do about that Niederreiter shot from the slot.
Yeah, that was one of those, and again, the third period was just a whole bunch of this, but that was just one of those difference in speed between the teams, and just, the Preds just looking, like you said, they're just reacting to stuff too slowly, and then it's too late. I thought Saros, I thought Saros was good. I can't really fault. You make a good point on how he was bracing for a pass on the first Stahl goal, but for the most part, I just can't put much of anything on him in this game. And I guess the question is, how much do you blame the Preds for mistakes and for not playing their game? How much do you credit the team they're playing for just being at times just overwhelming?
And the crazy part is, I thought Nedeljkovic in net for Carolina was pretty shaky last night. Like, especially in the first period and a half of that game. There were simple shots the Predators were putting towards the net, and he was having a tough time corralling them. There were rebounds that were popping out. Arvidsson had a redirection that almost trickled its way into the net. I thought Nedeljkovic really didn't look all that great in goal last night. And then the Predators just couldn't find a way to get to him consistently enough. So I'm interested to see what that looks like as they move forward here. Can Nedeljkovic settle in? Can the Predators find a way to get to him a little bit better starting in Game 2? That's going to be interesting to see. But a tough loss for the Predators in Game 1. They're now down 1-0 in this series. And as you know, and it was talked about a lot yesterday, the Predators have never won a series where they've lost Game 1. So that's eventually got to change. That's not going to be the case throughout the entire history of their franchise, but a tough start for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes last night. And we're off and running here today on the show, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, what did we think of the lineup last night in Game 1? How much blame does John Hynes deserve for what we saw last night in Game 1? We'll talk about that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
The Carolina Hurricanes get 3 third-period goals and win Game 1 by a 5-2 score.
The third period wasn't really our strongest period. I thought we started off the game pretty good. Then second period, we kind of sat back a couple penalties that kind of got our momentum off, and that's something that we obviously need to do a better job of, taking too many penalties. And Killers are doing a great job, but they're killing too much, so that's something that we need to improve on going forward. But then the third, I feel like we had a couple chances, but we didn't get that pushback that we wanted, especially after their first one.
That was Predators forward Philip Forsberg after the game last night, a 5-2 loss for the Predators in Game 1 of their Stanley Cup playoff series against the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Game 2 taking place tomorrow, reacting all show long today on Game 1 of the playoffs. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben on the text line says, great game. It was definitely worth keeping the team together again. I sense a little sarcasm from Ben there. It's one game in the series. I realize it looked bad. Carolina looked very good, but it is one game. I don't think we could just totally dismiss the series as of yet. It is one game.
Ben is the ultimate doom and gloomer.
He is. He's a big doom and gloomer.
Yeah, but it's also, it's not that surprising. There's some comments on my my column on The Athletic that are, and I'm not surprised, to that effect.
Sure.
I've got the how many seasons would Poyle have lasted in a big market stuff, the media soft, et cetera, et cetera. Look, even if this series goes 7 and the Preds lose Game 7, after 7 overtimes, there's going to be a lot of, why did we not sell, right?
Sure.
If they don't win. But if they get smoked, then it's going to become quicker and it's going to be more intense. And look, it's all fair. It is one game, though. That is worth mentioning at this point.
It is, and we'll see how the Predators respond coming up in Game 2. And one of the big talking points last night, while the game was going on, really before the game even started, was the lineup and what the lineup was going to look like. Would Eeli Tolvanen be a part of things? What's going to happen on the third defense pair? How do you handle the third line? If Arvidsson's back in there, where is he going to play? Arvidsson was back in there. He plays on the top line with Johansson and Forsberg. Eeli Tolvanen was out last night, which I don't think was a huge surprise when you listen to John Hines here on this show, when you listen to some comments that David Poyle made over the weekend as well. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by those moves. But when line rushes happened in the warm-up and all of a sudden the third defense pairing is Ben Harpur and Erik Gudbranson in Game 1 of the playoffs, and not only is Tanner Jeannot in there, which I don't think it surprised anybody, but Matthew Olivier is in there as well. No Brad Richardson, no Nick Cousins. I was surprised by what the lineup looked like a little bit, and I realized it was pretty clear what the Predators were trying to do. They were trying to be big. They were trying to be physical. That was the way they wanted to play in Game 1. I was pretty surprised, though, Joe, when I looked at those pregame line rushes, and Olivier was in there, and the third D pair ended up being Ben Harpur and Erik Gudbranson.
Yeah, and credit due, by the way. Gosh, he tweeted at us last night. I don't remember the name on the text line.
I think it was John from Clarksville.
John from Clarksville, and I was like, oh, come on now. They're not gonna put one of the herd liners on the third line. No way. And they did. So that was a surprise. It's at Forsberg's stash on Twitter, by the way, and a great picture of Forsberg's stash. But the Tolvanen being out, this has been hinted at and talked around for a few days. But yeah, I thought it would be like a Richardson or a Cousins, and instead those guys have played really well. That was a surprise, along with I thought Benning would be in this game. I wasn't shocked about Fabro either. But to have Benning or to have Gudbranson and Harpur was interesting and a little bit surprising to me. A lot of size, but those things. I mean, it was as big, burly a lineup as you could possibly put on the ice. And obviously, going in, I was like, well, if they win, then it's just like it's another stroke of genius. You know, you change things, you do some things you've never done before. I mean, I don't think Jeannot, Duchesne, and Haula have ever played together.
No.
And then if you lose, then the second guessing happens, instantly, and it did.
It did. I mean, that was a very popular topic on Twitter last night, and it was a popular topic in the post-game press conference as well. John Hynes talked about the difficulty of the lineup decisions and the lineup that he went with last night in Game 1. Here's what Predators head coach John Hynes had to say.
Was it difficult to put this together, and did you consider that maybe it was, I don't know, too heavy of a lineup going into this game?
So, guys, look, we came in as 2-2 going in the third period, and you have to make lineup decisions. Back to Jared's question. We were physical. It was hard. It was a hard-fought game. It's 2-2 going in the third period, and you look at a couple of goals. They're breakdowns in the goals. One of them's the turnover. They come back in. It's a D-zone coverage goal. So I think when you look at those situations, it's we can talk all about the lineup we want, but we played physical. We played hard. It was a competitive game, and we didn't find a way to win one. So as we've said, we're going to be able to make lineup decisions that we want, but we played hard, but we have to stay out of the penalty box. Interference, trip, high stick, holding, and 2 unsportsmanlike conducts at the end. So it didn't have anything to do with that.
So that was Predators head coach John Hynes after the game. And, Joe, let me first start by saying, obviously John Hynes has done a great job, and the fact that they're in this position, I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. I think he deserves some heat for these lineup decisions last night. I really do. I mean, and I've said this many times here on the show, there is absolutely zero reason for Erik Gudbranson to be in this lineup. There is no reason for Erik Gudbranson to be in this lineup. I thought Ben Harper last night was awful. And I realized, look, they had a lot more problems last night than just the third D pair. And I'm not saying if you have a different third D pair out there that all of a sudden you're going to beat Carolina in this game. As you said, I think it was pretty clear last night, especially as that game went along. There was a pretty big difference in the way these two teams played and the way that Carolina came out last night. I'm not sure if it mattered what lineup the Predators went with. But at some point, you've got to have a way to generate offense against Carolina. And when you're going with Matthew Olivier back on the herd line, you're moving Tanner Jeannot up to the third line. You played Matt Duchesne 10 minutes last night, and I think you only played him 6.5, 7 minutes at 5-on-5, which I get it. Matt Duchesne has been a little bit in the doghouse, but if you're going to play him 7 minutes at 5-on-5, I don't really know what the point of having him in the lineup is. I thought it was not a good lineup last night. I thought it from the start. The three of us were in a text message thread before the game started, kind of raising our eyebrows as to what was going on. I think John Hynes deserves some heat for what we saw last night. I was not a fan of that Game 1 lineup that they put out there.
By the way, was that just me? Because my question, I started that with I didn't hear the first question. Did you hear the beginning of the presser, or did it start with him talking?
It started with him talking to me.
Okay, all right. So it wasn't just me, because I'm like, wait a minute, who asked him a question? Okay, apparently he's talking about the lineup. Yeah, and he got annoyed by the lineup comment or questions last night. And he said at one point something that was interesting. He said it's not who plays, but how we play. And that's a very coach thing to think, very coach thing to say. And I get it. And that's been a big part of how they get here. But, I mean, it is still who, right?
Yes.
And I think, this league, it's who. It's players who, last night while writing, I'm watching St. Louis, Colorado. And I'm like, boy, I can't believe I picked St. Louis to win this series. That's not going to happen. Those guys are ridiculously good. And I'm not. That's not what Tolvanen is, but I do think that when it comes down to it, if you have any players who can do skilled things at an elite level, and you're playing an opponent like this, opponent that it's just going to be hard to keep them in that phone booth for 60 minutes at a time. I think that there's a real case to be made to get your people out there who can give you some offense off skills they have that few people do.
When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the lineup for the Predators last night in Game 1 and get your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. What did you think of the lineup in Game 1? What needs to change heading into Game 2? All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tonight, the Sounds open a 6-game homestand at First Horizon Park against the Gwinnett Stripers, the AAA affiliate of the Atlanta Braves. Pregame with Jeff Him begins at 6:20, and first pitch is at 6:35. Nashville Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and by 312 Pizza Company. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, reacting to a Game 1 loss for the Nashville Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes, and taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe, we've been talking about the lineup and some of the decisions made by John Hynes and the Predators coaching staff last night. Ben Harpur and Eric Gudbranson, the third defense pairing. Dante Fabro on the bench, Matt Benning on the bench, Ellie Tolvanen not in the lineup last night as well. Neither was Brad Richardson or Nick Cousins. So Olivier comes back in. Jeannot moves up to the third line. I thought they had their moments. I mean, obviously Eric Halla scores a goal. Jeannot did a good job of going to the front of the net. But just not enough offense, not enough zone time sustained for the Predators last night. Let's go to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, when you're as big of a disadvantage as the Predators are in this series, you owe it to your team to ice the best lineup possible. Last night was not it. Joe, when you look at the lineup last night, how much of the game and the result do you put at the feet of the lineup that was out there, and how much of it was just, hey, Carolina was by far the better team in the second half of that game last night?
I wrote this in The Athletic. I'll say it now and again. The lineup is worth discussing. It's worth looking at. I'm not sure that was the way to go. I'm also not sure it makes any difference at all. And it's going to be it's going to be overplayed because it's an obvious thing to talk about. But the bigger issue is Carolina to me. The bigger issue. So put in Benny and Fabro. A different outcome. Put in Tolvanen. I mean, I would put him in because I need to score a power play goal at some point in this series. Okay, so yeah, I think that I think that it's worth looking at, talking about, but it's going to be way overblown today relative to the bigger issue for the Preds, and that is the Carolina lineup. They are so good, and again, you're talking about that forecheck, Robby, and as the game progressed, it's just like, man, their decor is so good at moving the puck. They're so quick. They get it out of there. You can't get anything to stick on those guys. And then they're moving it on you, and you can't hit anybody. And they are just really good. And you can come up with any combination you want, and you're going to have the same problem. So that's my takeaway. It's worth a discussion because you got to figure something out. If you're John Hynes, but I think a lot of today is going to be devoted to that, and I don't think it's as big a deal as some people want to make it.
Porth, what did you think of the Game 1 lineup last night for the Predators, and how much do you think that had to do with the result that we saw last night?
Not much with the result, but clearly there are changes that need to be made. I thought they lacked enough offense, but to Joe's point, I don't know how much it matters. Like, for instance, when you look at the power play, a lot of people last night were clamoring for Ellie Tolvanen. What difference does Ellie Tolvanen make on the power play last night when you're spending half the power play just trying to get possession?
Yep.
Like, Tolvanen isn't going to outmuscle a Jordan Staal or a Warren Foegele or forwards like that in the Carolina lineup to even get possession on the power play. Like, you have to have the puck for Tolvanen to be a difference maker on the power play, and they had a really hard time possessing the puck at 5-on-4 with the advantage. Now, it could make a difference in Game 2 if you do win a face-off and establish possession, and that's why I would probably have Tolvanen in there. But I don't think you can look at last night's loss and say that was because of the lineup. Now, maybe they tried to the extreme of being too physical.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that.
Because it was evident early on that the Canes were not going to back down. And how many times did you see the Preds try to lay a check and they were the ones ending up on the ice?
Yeah.
I mean, Tanner Jeannot went in there almost every shift trying to throw a check, throwing his body around, and sometimes it worked, but sometimes he bounced off a Carolina player and ended up on the ice.
That was a great one. I mean, it was a great hit by him, but it was like he just went horizontal into the air,
which we've not seen.
Yeah.
And I
agree with everything you just said, Ryan Porth.
Oh, well, thank you, Joe. That's something new to the program.
It's the nicest thing he said about you all week.
Like I understand that is the way you're going to have to play against Carolina. That is the way Boston has played each of the last two postseasons, where they have completely embarrassed the Canes in the playoffs. But do you have the right personnel to do that? That's the question that I would have after game one, where Carolina clearly was ready for that physical presence from the Preds.
Well, they were, and Boston plays that way, but Boston also has Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak. I mean, you got Philip Forsberg right now, who I thought played pretty well last night. I mean, outside of him, your offense is just limited at forward. I mean, it's just the truth of the matter. That's been the case all year long. I mean, there's Johansson's getting a lot of heat on our text line right now. I understand it, and a lot of people are pointing to the goal scored, not only the first Stahl goal that was scored, but the Niederreiter goal as well, where Johansson's just sitting there watching the play. Now, there were 4 other Predators watching the play too, so I get it. But I didn't think that Johansson last night was just some anchor out there. I thought he played okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was fine. The first pass he made to set up the Forsberg goal was an elite play. I mean, that's an elite-level play. He's just got to be better. But, I think we're getting to the point now with him and with Duchesne where we keep having the same conversations about them. I mean, they're guys that when they're on, they look pretty good. They're just not on anywhere near as often as you need them to be.
Also, with the lineup last night, I thought the more egregious decision was on defense with the third pair than anything made on offense. And that may not be a popular comment, but you look at that Canes third goal, Harper and Goodbranson were skating in quicksand, skating in quicksand, and looked like.
Well, and even after that, I mean, they give up that goal, and then Aho gets a breakaway like on the next shift while Harper's out there. I mean, Harper looked like he was taking his driver's test, trying to go around. I mean, it was unbelievable, just a traffic cone there.
Yeah,
it was bad.
Yeah, and I don't know. Again, I don't know how much of a difference if Benning and Fabro is your third pair, but I don't think they are looking like, in your words, a traffic cone out there like Goodbranson and Harper look like most of the night.
And, Joe, I think the one when I look at that decision in particular, and I've made my thoughts on the Harper-Goodbranson pairing pretty clear at this point, not a big fan of it. But if you're going to do that, to me, it makes more sense to try to play that way at home when you can control the matchups a little bit better. Having Ben Harper and Eric Goodbranson out there against Sebastian Aho is probably not a very good recipe for success. And I think if you're going to try to play that way, I guess I would have liked to have seen that at home where you can control the matchups a little bit better rather than in game one of the playoffs on the road.
Yeah, like I said, Goodbranson, he had that really nice poke check, to stop a 2-on-1. And I was like, oh, Goodbranson, I'm bringing that to the show tomorrow. And then, never mind. But, guys, we're 45 minutes in, and we still, when we're talking about the lineup, still haven't talked about, to me, the biggest disappointment, which was the second line. I didn't see them all night.
Yeah.
And I would no longer – I mean, this happens fast. First of all, it happens every year that you've got something that's doing something the regular season, and then you take it to the postseason, and it's like, what happened? But I would not consider that line untouchable at this point either. I was very underwhelmed. I mean, they just couldn't get anything going. I mean, Duchesne, made a great pass on the Holla goal, at least made a play that led to a goal. But that line, to me, has to be examined as well because they just got gobbled up.
And look, a lot of people were frustrated last night that Eeli Tolvanen wasn't in there. Again, Joe, that was not a surprise to me. Now, I did say on the show yesterday, and I was on with Jared yesterday as well, that I would have Tolvanen in there because I just think that what he brings to the table, you might need. It could change a game. Like, you're going to need him at some point on the power play. But I think if you feel that way, you also have to recognize that Eeli Tolvanen has not been very good as of late. Like, he's got to be better than he's been, or he's not really serving a purpose for you in his lineup. I mean, I know he got injured, and sometimes it takes players a while to come back from injury, but he's not been the same guy since he's come back from injury, and he's not been anywhere near as effective 5-on-5. Forget the power play. He's not been anywhere near as effective 5-on-5 either. So, look, I think you're going to see him at some point. I think there's a decent chance you might see Eeli Tolvanen back in there in Game 2. But just because he gets back in there, I don't think everything's just automatically going to be cured. He's got to be a whole lot better than he's been down the stretch. And I think it's disappointing that we're even having this conversation based on the way he was playing earlier this season. Because to me, the way he was playing earlier this season, if you're even approaching that, if you're Eeli Tolvanen, there's no way John Hines is taking you out of the lineup.
I agree. And I also wonder if, a lot of times guys come back from injury, they're able to play, but they're not all right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the case with him. But maybe a little extra rest here will make a difference. I do think it's something I think you have to try, because, again, he can just do some things that few guys in your lineup can do. And Carolina has a lot more guys like that than you do. So I think it's worth a look. But, yes, it's almost like, I mean, the Tolvanen reaction since this even got brought up last week, it's now we're going back 3 years to he's going to come in and, be a top 6 forward in this cup run right away. I mean, it's let's pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations.
Coming up next, there was a series of events last night that reminded me of the 2019 series against the Dallas Stars. And that was not a very good thing for the Nashville Predators. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts on Game 1 of the Predators and Hurricanes series. The Predators fall 5-2 last night to the Carolina Hurricanes. Taking your thoughts at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So, Joe, I said before the break, there was a series of events and just the way the game shook out last night at times reminded me of the 2019 series against the Stars from this standpoint. And we talked about it a little bit to begin the show. I didn't think it was a very good night last night for Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis. And Ryan Ellis in particular last night, I thought at times he was soft. I mean, you got Jordan Stahl coming in on the forecheck last night. Ellis just gets totally knocked off the puck. It's a goal. It's 4-2. You feel like the game's over with at that point. And not only does Ellis get knocked off the puck on the forecheck by Stahl, but Josi tries to clear it. It goes off of Stahl, back onto his stick, and all of a sudden it's in the back of your net. You mentioned the first Stahl goal where Josi just kind of lets Stahl go right down Broadway there, and he splits the defense between he and Ekholm. I did not think it was a very good night for the top defense pairing for the Nashville Predators. Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis, I thought, got exposed at times, and that's led to a lot of conversation on Periscope today. Our friend Jeff on Periscope, very critical of Ryan Ellis's performance. I got a few people on the text line as well, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, critical of Ellis's performance as well. I think back to that 2019 series, and that was not a good look for Ryan Ellis. The play everybody thinks about is Jamie Benn just shoving him off the puck and Dallas scoring the goal there. Now, we came to find out after that Ellis was hurt in that series, so you've got to keep that in mind here. But I did not think it was an overly impressive last night for that defense pair. I thought at times they were soft and they got pushed around, and that can't happen. Like, those two guys can't play the way they played last night for this team to have any chance whatsoever in this series.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I'll go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and this is an unnamed texter, but the text is, Ellis needs to sit, figure out if he wants to play or not. He's been absent all season, brings little to nothing to the ice. He's undersized, can't handle physical force, can't clear the front of the net. This love affair with what he brought in the past has got to stop. Seems like every time we pay players, Arvidsson, Ellis, Duchesne, Johansson, they seem to disappear. Where's the accountability? And, this has come up a time or two with Ellis. And again, like, Ellis is a guy who, and I don't know, I'm looking at that list of guys. I can't sit here and say, got paid, stop caring, got paid, stop playing.
Yeah.
I think with Ellis, there's some realities with him, just like there's some realities with how good Carolina is. I mean, there are times when Ellis, he's not big, this is why some people, we're hesitant about him, but I agree. He's got to figure out a way to be more effective than that and be tougher than that. Honestly, on that basketball bounce pass goal, thought he did about everything you could possibly do.
Yeah, I don't hold anything against him on that one.
The redirect that ends up going glove side on Saros. But this is not the first time this has happened where he gets pushed around. And, there's no, I don't know what the answer is other than, Ellis, please play better, right? There's not going to be a move relative to this.
No.
He's a huge part of their team. I disagree that, he's been ineffective all season. I think he's been pretty good this season. But he is one of those guys that we've seen a few times now in the postseason where when it gets the way postseason hockey gets, it does not suit him all the time.
Sure. And look, I think you've got to be realistic with this conversation too. I think sometimes people go to way too many extremes when it comes to Ryan Ellis. Like, there are some people that thinks that Ryan Ellis is no good and he just doesn't deserve to be out there. And we've gotten a couple of those on the text line today. I know Jared's often very, very critical of Ryan Ellis as well. I think you can recognize that Ryan Ellis is a pretty good defenseman while also recognizing that he's got some shortcomings in his game when it comes to the physicality part of it. Like, nobody's going to mistake Ryan Ellis for Shea Weber out there throwing people aside. Now, he's been a very smart player. Positionally, he's usually in the right spot. Like even to your point last night on the Teravainen goal that ties that game up at 1, like I don't know what else Ryan Ellis is supposed to do on that play. He was in the right spot. He was between the forward and the goaltender, and Teravainen just made a heck of a play that you've just sometimes got to tip your cap to your opponent. So most of the time, Ryan Ellis is a good player, and he is in the right spot, and he overcomes his lack of size by knowing what to do. But there are some realities where sometimes he just gets shoved around, and he did last night. Now, I thought at times last night, and I think a lot of this is due to Carolina as well, and they deserve credit for it, I thought there was a little bit of panic in the game of the Predators, trying to get the puck out too soon, trying to really just chip it down the wall and not being calm, not being poised, making the right play, making the strong play along the boards. I mean, Yossi's trying to get the puck out of the zone on that 4th goal by Carolina, and he just shoots it right in there to Jordan Staal there. I mean, it's plays that we don't normally see happen from Ellis and Josi last night we saw, and that's not all just their mistakes. Carolina deserves some credit for that, but they've got to find a way to be more effective, not only in the D zone, but getting out of the D zone. I thought they struggled at times last night to get out, and that's usually not something that's a problem for Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis. And if that's going to be the case, it's just going to be difficult for the Predators to sustain any offensive zone time whatsoever when you're having that much trouble getting out of your own end.
Well, and that's the Carolina effect, right?
Yep.
I mean, to me, more than anything, it's just like when the Preds in this run, 27-1 to get here, they found that when they really lay the body on people, sometimes they get, they're moving that puck a little faster than they want to, and then you have an opportunity off that, or you can keep cycling in the forecheck, or, you can get a turnover, make score off it. I mean, Carolina puts so much pressure on you, and John Hines talked a little bit about that last night too. There were some times where patience maybe would have given them opportunity, and it wasn't there. It's easy for us to say all this stuff. When you're playing that team, they really put you under the gun, and it is as simple with some of these guys, and those two guys for sure, Ellis and Josi. I mean, they have to play better. They can play better than they played last night. There was no doubt about that.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. James text in, I don't understand why Arvidsson's on the top line. He constantly gets knocked down or is falling down. He hasn't been using his speed to his advantage. Duchesne should move up with Forsberg and Joey because he's harder to knock off the puck. If it were up to me, Rocco would play over Victor Arvidsson.
Arvidsson,
he comes back in last night. It's his first game. It's playoff hockey. Look, and we've talked about this, Joe. There is kind of a knock on Arvidsson that when the playoffs come around, he's just not been the same guy. Like I thought last year against Arizona, he was really good, but all you got to do is go and look at his just basic stats. He has not been as productive in the playoffs historically as he's been in the regular season, and I think you can point to what's pretty obvious at this point, that sometimes his size can be an issue when it comes to the playoff hockey discussion, much like we were just talking about with Ryan Ellis as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So, look, it's interesting with Grimaldi. That poor guy couldn't even get on. Like the Bally Sports had their scratches list, and they didn't even mention poor Rocco.
Yeah.
But you could make the case for him too. You could. Another smaller guy, but a guy who skates and has a lot of energy. I think it's an interesting point on that top line. Does Hines want to stick with that? Like you said earlier, they did some good things. They got a goal. Johansson made a big-time play to Forsberg. But is Arvidsson the best choice with those guys? It's a fair question, too. I think there's a lot beyond just the obvious stuff, the third pairing and Tolvanen, for Hines to look at going into game 2.
So we gave our predictions yesterday for this series for the Predators against the Hurricanes. A lot of you gave your predictions as well on our text line or on social media. Does Game 1 change the way you feel about this series? We'll discuss that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesale Link Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Discussing a Game 1 loss for the Nashville Predators. They fall 5-2 at the hands of the Carolina Hurricanes on the road. They trail the best-of-7 series 1-0 in favor of the Carolina Hurricanes. And taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So yesterday, Ryan Porth and Joe Rexrode gave their predictions for this series. I gave mine last week before I took off to the Grand Canyon. I had Carolina in 6. Joe Rexrode had Carolina winning in 7 games. Ryan Porth had the Nashville Predators winning in 6 games. It's 1 game in the playoffs, and there's a tendency a lot of times in playoff series to overreact one way or the other. Lots of highs, lots of lows, emotional roller coasters. That's part of what makes the playoffs so much fun. But I ask you both this. As you watched Game 1 last night, did it change the way you view this series at all? Did it change the way you think this series might go? Joe, let's start with you.
Yeah.
He said, yeah. All right.
I mean, I feel less like the Preds are going to take this to 7 after watching that. I mean, because you're right. There's so much overreaction to 1 game of a playoff series. But what I think we saw last night was a return to what we saw when these teams played each other most nights. Right? Of the 6 games that they played each other before the final 2, again, you throw out the last one, you do take something from the 7th game. I mean, it was a full lineups, but the Preds needed it a lot more than the Canes did. It just looked like the same kind of game. And if that's how it's going to be, and if the Canes are going to be able to impose their game on the Preds like that, I don't know that the Preds are going to get 3 out of this series.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looked like Carolina was starting to they was separating themselves from the Predators as that game went along. I just wonder, I looked at that game last night, and I had Carolina winning in 6. I don't feel all that much differently about it now. I think the Predators are going to make some adjustments. I think you'll see a lineup change in Game 2. And, Joe, to your point earlier in the show, like even though you could make the argument that Saros shouldn't have been cheating as much to the middle as he did on that second goal, it's still not a goal that I just like it's just egregious or anything like that on UC Saros. So I still feel good about the goaltending the Predators got last night. I feel good about UC Saros moving forward as well. So I still think the Predators are going to find a way to win a couple in this series. So nothing really changed for me last night. But I will say, like, you've got to find a way if you're the Predators to break through that forecheck a little bit better than they did. I thought they would handle that a little bit better than they did last night. And I think they're equipped to do that moving forward. Like, and a big part of that's going to be Yossi and Ellis. Like, those two guys, they are so gifted at moving the puck, and Ekholm as well, so gifted at moving the puck out of the zone and transitioning that way. And the thing was, like, I thought it took Carolina a little bit to settle in. I thought it took the Predators a little while to settle into that game as well. But I didn't feel like the Predators were having all that much difficulty handling Carolina's forecheck in the first period. Like, they were getting out of the zone. They weren't getting hemmed in there. It was going back and forth, and they were trading chances a little bit. But I didn't think the Predators looked like they were overwhelmed at all. I thought as that game went along, they looked like they were overwhelmed in the third period. And that, to me, is the concerning part. I also think that has a chance to change. I don't think that just necessarily means that they have no answer for that moving forward either.
Well, I agree, and I think they looked gassed. Someone texted that on the text line.
Yeah,
that they looked gassed, and they did. And again, Carolina can do that to you. I want to hear from Ryan Porth on his prediction.
Yeah, Porth, did you change your mind at all about your series prediction last night? Preds in 6. Do you feel any differently today?
The optimist in me wants to say no, but yeah. Last night did change the way I think this series is going to go. It did. And I think the one thing that I maybe either didn't realize or overlooked with the Canes lineup is their sheer size.
Yeah.
Like, this reminds me of the Winnipeg lineup that the Preds were facing in 2018, where they are just flat out bigger than the Preds. And I think that maybe the physicality and everything too is something that we overlooked with this Canes team. Rod Brindamore said it last night of the post game that, you know, whatever style of game that is thrown their way, they feel equipped to handle it. And that was very evident early on in that game, like I said last hour, with the physicality. And the fact that the Preds played pretty darn well in the first period and they didn't have a lead, and then what happened in the third period, really in the last two periods last night, was a sign to me that if Saros doesn't stand on his head in multiple games in this series, it could be a quick series.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think we kind of knew that coming into the series as well. Like, it's going to require Saros, if they've got a chance to win, a couple of things are going to have to happen. Number one, you've got to find a way to be productive on the power play. When Carolina gives you those chances, you've got to find a way to break through and score on the power play. And it's got to be a threat out there. It was not close to being a threat last night for the Predators. And number two, Saros is going to have to steal a game or two in this series. Like, that's the way it's going to have to be. Like, the Predators, if Saros doesn't stand on his head in at least a couple of games in this series, I think the talent discrepancy is there. I mean, they just don't have a chance if he doesn't.
See, I thought that was the number going into the series, that Saros was going to have to steal one or two. After last night, I feel like that number is 2 or 3.
Maybe.
For them to have a chance to come out of this series.
It might be. It might be.
So, Michael from Hermitage on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, last night was one of the games UC should have stolen because there was no one in front of the net. Well, first of all, there was a ton of people in front of the net on the fourth goal. I mean, the first goal was, it was a redirect that was just, you can't, like, there's nothing you're going to do about that.
No.
When you send it the other way, it's just bad luck. I suppose you hope he gets the Niederreiter goal, but what chance does he have?
Did you see the save he made right before the Niederreiter goal?
Exactly. I mean, I just can't. Like, you brought up the point earlier, and I think it's a fair point on, Stahl's 4-on-4 goal being one where, he maybe cheated a little bit, thinking pass, and it was an incredible, but still, like, the shot was incredible, right? I guess maybe he could have gotten a piece of a couple of those, but that was not one of those. It wasn't like last year. We talked about this yesterday, where it's like, ooh, got to have that one. Like, yeah, that one, that one can't get in. I didn't frankly think that of any of the 4 goals last night.
Well, I would agree, and I think as you look at the series, I think sometimes, and people are going to talk about this all day, we've already seen a couple of these thoughts on our text line, and that is the Predators have never won a series when they've lost game 1. Now, I'm not saying that that's totally meaningless, but to me, that doesn't have anything to do with this year. Like, if the Predators come out and they win game 2, it's 1-1. You're heading back home, and you've accomplished your mission at that point. You've taken home ice advantage away from Carolina, and you're coming back home 1-1, and you've got a chance, if you can take care of business at home, to win the series at that point. Now, obviously, I think it's going to be a lot easier said than done for that to be the case. But the playoffs, this happens a lot. It's the playoffs basically, as a fan watching, and even as a player to a certain degree, it's about how well you handle momentum swings. That's a big part of what these playoffs are in the Stanley Cup playoffs. How can you handle momentum swings? I didn't think the Predators handled it all that well last night. I thought once Carolina kind of got rolling downhill, the Predators couldn't do anything to stop it. Can you counteract that in game 2? And if you go out and you win in game 2, all of a sudden this thing shifts on a dime heading back to Nashville. Another part we haven't talked about yet that I was interested to see what sort of an effect this would have. I mean, there were 12,000 people in the building last night for Carolina, and that's not something that we're used to, obviously, this season. How would the Predators handle that? How would the young guys handle that? And how would that affect the way Carolina played? I thought it did at times affect the way Carolina played.
I thought there were more than 12,000 people in
like
that.
A lot of people
in that building, and maybe they just packed the lower bowl with those 12,000. But certainly the lower bowl did not look like it was at any sort of capacity restriction outside of the tarps that were over parts of the lower bowl.
It looked like there were a lot of people in there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who apparently don't like Eric Halla very much. By the way,
apparently not.
Yeah, what was that about?
I hate Eric Halla.
I mean, he played what?
He was there for 41 games.
I know. I was about to say half a season. What did he do?
I don't know.
Apparently nothing.
Did he refuse autograph requests every day he was there? I mean, I don't know.
Well, apparently during the second intermission, he's on the headset for the TV interview, and all the Canes fans are booing him. And apparently at the same exact time within the arena, they're going through a video with like some COVID safety protocols of like, make sure you're wearing your mask in the lower, like in your seats and all that. And some people in the press box thought people were booing the message on the Jumbotron. Yeah. And then they look down and it's like, oh no, Eric Halla was doing a TV interview next to the glass.
The people's enemy, Eric Halla, who knew that 41 games as a Hurricane could infuriate so many people. Like, I'm trying to think of what the Predators equivalent would be to as mad as Carolina fans were at Eric Hall last night. It'd be like Predators fans booing like Olli Jokinen or somebody like that. He was here for half a year.
Olli Jokinen.
Yeah.
Wow. Derek Roy.
Yeah. Wayne Simmons.
Yeah. Like
there 5 games.
Yeah. Predators fans just totally irate at Wayne Simmons coming back. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. Hang with us, Ryan and Hermitage, on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll get to you coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
how do you balance not panicking, but knowing you got to do more?
Well, it's a long series. I think panic is not a very good word right now. I don't sense any panic in our game. We're a confident group. We've gone through some adversity this season, and so I'm very confident that we're gonna bounce back and have a really good game on Wednesday.
That was Predators forward and apparently enemy of North Carolina, Eric Halla, after the game last night, discussing the Game 1 loss for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes. They fall 5-2. Carolina leads the series 1-0. Game 2 coming up on Wednesday. So we'll see if the Predators can respond in Game 2 and even this thing up 1-1. Now, Joe, to Halla's point there, like, yes, it was bad last night in the second half of that game, and Carolina started to dominate more as that game went along. It is one game. It is the first game of what could potentially be a 7-game series. Going down 0-1 in a series is not the time to panic. You get down 0-2, then you start to get into panic territory and must-win territory, but I don't think that the Predators feel like there's just an overwhelming dread or panic right now losing the first game of a 7-game series.
No. And, the history piece of that is interesting. I mean, I had no idea that stat until yesterday that this franchise is 0-11 overall after losing Game 1. I mean, that's quite a stat. You would think in 11 tries you'd have a Game 1 L that then you'd win the series. But like you said earlier, I mean it really doesn't have anything to do with this series. I do think that the fact that the last game just sort of progressed to where it looked like Carolina just sort of wore Nashville into the boards.
Yeah,
that's the concern. If you could take that first period and do it over and over again, you're right in there with these guys.
Let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Ryan from Hermitage, who wants to weigh in on Game 1. Ryan, thanks for calling in to Robby and Rexrode.
Thanks, guys. Honestly, I think they did good in the first period. They did okay in the second period. I think their third period is when they lost it. But I think they went with too much muscle last night instead of going with the balance what they did in the second last game of the season when they clinched the playoffs. They went with more of a balanced attack that game. I think they went with just a little bit too much muscle last night, and it backfired on them. And not having guys like Tolden and maybe Fabro or Benning in to help us neutralize some of the speed on the back check or in the power play, Carolina kind of just wore them down and just the way it's happened. But the one good thing I like in the third period, they didn't back down. They were losing. They were still fighting. They were still pushing. Even look at Harper at the end of the game when he was trying to pick a fight with pretty much the half team on the ice all by himself.
All right, thanks for the call, Ryan. We appreciate it. I mean, to Ryan's point there, I mean, we've talked a little bit today about the lineup decisions, Joe. The problem that you continue to have on that third defense pairing, which is part of the reason that I think Ben Harper is in there, is who's going to play on the left? Like, if it's not going to be Ben Harper on that third D pairing on the left, who's it going to be? Because I don't know that I've never seen Dante Fabro play the left. I have no clue whether or not Matt Benning can play on the left side. And if neither one of those guys can do it, you're pretty limited in the options that you can have on that third D pair. I mean, it's not as simple as, hey, Ben Harper and Eric Goodbranson have got to go. Well, let me back it up. It is as simple as Eric Goodbranson's have to go, but it's not as simple as Ben Harper has to go because who's going to play the left if he's not in there?
So sounds like you'd go Harper Benning then.
Yeah, I mean, if Harper's got to be in there because nobody else can play the left, I would go Harper Benning.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I hear that on the Preds fighting. Look, I didn't think the Preds cowered or backed down. I just think they just got badly outplayed as the game went on. And again, I think the biggest issue we can talk about, put this person in, put that person in, and there's going to be adjustments, and maybe you find something that just works great. But the biggest issue is Carolina. They're just really good. And so I don't want to sit here and say that there's no chance, because you get this next game and you reset the series and the pressure goes back to them. But we still haven't seen the Preds. We haven't seen much of the Preds outplay this team or even hang with this team this year. We saw it in the Saturday to get into the playoffs when it was absolutely everything on the line for the Preds, and the Canes would have liked to have gotten the President's Trophy, I guess. That's when we've seen it.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, 0 speed and struggled just to shoot. The Preds always struggle to throw it at the net. If you wait for a perfect shot, you will always lose. We need 35-plus shots per game. Now, the last part of that text, I hear what you're saying. It's difficult to accomplish against Carolina. They don't give up a ton of shots. They've got the puck most of the game, and defensively, Carolina is very, very good. Now, I will say, and I even thought this in the first period as well, the Predators passed up on too many shots last night, especially when you look at Nedeljkovic in net and the way that he was struggling to handle the puck a little bit and giving up some rebounds. I did think the Predators should have thrown more pucks towards his way than they did. I mean, there's one example, and the Predators did this a couple of times in the first period, where they either kept the puck in at the blue line. That's part of what led to Forsberg's goal. He made a great play on the blue line and kept it in, got that puck down the wall, and Johansson did work from there. They had a couple of really good either forced turnovers at the blue line or they were able to keep the puck in. And one time Johansson got the puck. He was swinging around coming into the zone, and he had an opportunity from the high slot to shoot, and he kind of drifted off a little bit and dropped it back for Ryan Ellis. The play ended up getting broken up, and Carolina was going the other way. Like, plays like that, when you know a goaltender maybe has a little bit of nerves coming into the game and he's not handling the puck very smoothly, just put that thing on net and see what happens. I would have liked to see the Predators do that a little bit more often than they did earlier in the game.
Yeah, and again, it sounds good. Like, just shoot more.
Right.
But there is also like a goaltender like that, you're not sure who's going to be in goal. He's young. Sometimes there's just if you just throw stuff up at the net, again, you may help that guy ultimately. And I thought, and you brought this up even when we were texting, last night during the game. Like they had some time in there where he looked a little bit vulnerable. Those rebounds were pretty fat, and he just wasn't quite. And you got to jump on those. I thought Arvidsson had one really good chance. He just couldn't, couldn't find the puck in there. But when you have those opportunities, you've got to take those shots. And look, when you're on the power play, you got to get shots.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got to set up and get shots. And again, it's just amazing to watch those teams. You watch the Preds on the power play trying to set up, and the Canes immediately setting up in like 2 seconds. And then again, the Preds did what they wanted to do on the kill. They did great on their penalty kill, but they've got to figure something out to get that thing going, or else again, like Tolvanen or no Tolvanen isn't going to matter.
When we come back, how surprised were we with the way Carolina responded to the physicality last night that the Predators tried to dish out? And what does that mean for the Predators and their game plan as they move forward here in this series? We'll get to all that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Hey, Smashville, the game Nashville, and Dos Equis is bringing the party to you. Text the word GOLDEN to 615-737-1025. That's GOLDEN to 615-737-1025 to qualify for the ultimate in-home watch party. And did I mention one lucky fan is getting tickets to a playoff game at Bridgestone Arena? Get a dose, Smashville. You must be 21 or older to enter and win. Enjoy Dos Equis responsibly. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Port there with you on this Tuesday morning in Middle Tennessee, discussing the Predators' loss in Game 1 to the Carolina Hurricanes and taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe, we talked about the game plan for the Predators heading into this series and heading into the Game 1 matchup yesterday against Carolina. Be physical with this Carolina team. Try to be the more physical team. Try to shut down the middle of the ice and try to make sure you try to, muck things up a little bit and keep the battle in the trenches, as Chris Mason said last week here on the show. And I thought the Predators did that to an extent last night. I still think there's a better formula there in terms of really hammering in on the forecheck and establishing your physicality that way. I didn't think the Predators did that as consistently as we've seen at other times last night. But I was pretty impressed, Joe, by the way Carolina handled the physicality from the Predators. I did not come away from that game thinking that Carolina was going to be intimidated. I didn't think that Carolina got pushed around. And if you're the Predators, that was going to be, I think, one of the things in your pocket heading into the series that you felt good about and that you felt like could be a strength for your group in this matchup against Carolina. And I walked away from Game 1 last night thinking it may not be Carolina's strength, but certainly they did not look intimidated by the Predators and the physicality they tried to bring to the table last night.
No, and I'm not all that surprised. They heard all the talk and they knew what happened in the two games in Nashville, and so of course they know what playoff hockey is. I mean, these guys have been on runs together, so they've seen both sides of it in the postseason in the last couple of years. So I'm not surprised they responded well to it. The funny thing is, I thought they responded really well to it, and it was, I thought both sides just laying it on each other in the first period, but it was still a good period for the Preds.
Yep.
So even with Carolina giving it back, like it felt like an even period or so in terms of the territorial battle. And it's a means to an end. Yeah, you're hitting people, but you're doing it for a purpose. And I thought the Preds still got done what they wanted to get done, But the bottom line is, the Hurricanes made it clear that they're not going to back down, that they can do that too. And then they got it to their kind of game eventually, to the point where by the end it was like, oh, this looks just like what we saw a lot this season. And it's just a team that is so skilled, so good at moving the puck that you can't hit them. And that was the discouraging part for me for the Preds, that they looked like, and again, they looked gassed, I thought, in that third period relative to Carolina.
And Rod Brindamore, coach of the Hurricanes last night, talked about the style of play that it's going to take to win in the playoffs and how he feels like his Hurricanes team can handle any style the Predators throw their way. Here's what Hurricanes head coach Rod Brindamore had to say.
Rod, the nature of the postseason in Game 1 showed up very physical out there, and your guys seemed to not only accept the challenge but respond to it, and even at times maybe got Nashville running around a little bit and maybe out of their game a little. I know you can't speak for Nashville, but that seems like you guys may have frustrated them a little bit.
Like I said earlier, I'm not concerned at how the game's going to be played, because we kind of have shown that all year. Whatever style ends up playing, we've answered the bell always. And so, if it's an up and down game, okay, we can do that. If it ends up being a little grittier, that actually suits us too.
So that was Rod Brindamore after the game last night, discussing the Hurricanes and the style of play in the playoffs, saying they can play any game that presents itself. I agree with that to a certain extent. I mean, Port brought up a good point earlier. They've got some guys that are huge. I mean, Jordan Staal, his size, his speed, his physicality, I thought was a major difference in the game last night. He comes in, he throws Ryan Ellis off the puck, They get it back. He scores that goal to put the Hurricanes up 4-2. The game's basically over with at that point. He comes streaking down the middle, and you think it's Jordan Staal, and there's not a whole lot of speed there, and all of a sudden he just out-muscles and out-skates Roman Josi and Matthias Ekholm, who are trailing all over him from behind. So I certainly thought that was a big factor in the game. I do think guys like Sebastian Aho and Teuvo Teravainen, and even to a certain degree Andrei Svechnikov, some big weapons the Hurricanes have offensively, they're not the most physical guys. Like, they're not the most, guys that are willing to go in there and absorb some contact. And I didn't think the Predators were as heavy on them as I thought they could be. And I think Carolina deserves a lot of credit for that because, to your point, Joe, as that game went along, Carolina was just so tenacious on the forecheck. They had the puck the whole time. And when you've got the puck the whole time, when you're wearing the other team down, it's hard for the Predators to sustain that physical style of play that they want to play if they can never get out of their own zone and get the puck. Like, part of being physical and part of getting in there and being as effective as they have been, like we've seen from the Herd line, is getting in on the forecheck and creating turnovers and creating offense that way. And when you're not in the offensive zone, you can never get to that style. And I thought Carolina in the second half of the game, they almost totally prevented the Predators from getting to that style.
Yeah, and of course the Predators still have guys also who don't like that style, don't play that style. That's well documented. It wasn't that long ago in the postseason we were talking about, man, this team just gets pushed around, especially 2 years ago against Dallas. So a lot of those same guys are still on this team. So it's I just like you said, they control the puck, they neutralize that. The funny thing is, as we talk about the lineups, guys, I'm sure it'll look different, but I actually and I look at it, it's like, man, I like the Herd line, but how much Herd line do you want? I actually thought like it worked out all right with Jeannot on that third line. I thought that they had some good shifts where he was planted in front of the net.
Yep.
And and that's exactly what you want. I mean, you want to be able to be to those hard areas, which again is something that in postseasons past hasn't happened enough for the Preds. So like you could look at that aspect of the lineup and say, actually, that did what it was supposed to do. My concern is you're a line that has been such a catalyst for this team through the last couple months. I didn't see anything from them. I didn't see them sustain anything. That's the Granlund, Cunnin, Yarncroke line. Not the most physical line. That's one of those lines I look at. It's like, it looks like a really good regular season line, and maybe in the playoffs, even though we don't think of Carolina as a physical team, they look like they got out physical last night. So, I mean, I think on both sides of this, you got some guys who are built for it, some who aren't. And, to me, that aspect of the game was a draw, and Nashville needs it to be better than a draw to overcome the skill advantage, pretty distinct skill advantage that Carolina has.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mike from Montana texting in, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Carolina has more talent and outworked us last night. We need to find a way to knock them off their game, and you need more from your star players. Josi a -3 last night. We've touched on Josi and Ellis. It was not a good game from those two last night. They're going to have to be better moving forward. But I continue to just be – I don't even know what the right word is. I was kind of amazed at the usage of Matt Duchene last night. And look, I get it, and we can't even have a conversation anymore about Matt Duchene without fans just getting all nuts about him and throwing – that he shouldn't even be in the lineup. He needs to be a healthy scratch. But if you're going to make the decision to play him, if you're John Hines, which I still think is the right decision, I think he's one of your 12 best forwards, then play him. He had 10 minutes last night. He had like 7 minutes of ice time, 5-on-5. You're down in the game, and he got a little bit more action as they got down, later, and they were trying to mount a comeback. But play the guy. Like I thought he made a good play on Halla's goal. To your point, I didn't think the Halla, Duchene, Jeannot line was all that bad for the most part last night. I thought they looked okay. Like, to me, there's no excuse in the playoffs for Matt Duchene getting like 7 minutes of even strength ice time. Like, if that's going to be what it is moving forward, he's not really serving much of a purpose out there on the third line. Like, to me, that just doesn't make a ton of sense.
So is that a comment on like his defensive responsibility, like trust in that, lack of physicality?
Could be.
Because like, I mean, that's a guy who, again, like, you got to have people in this lineup who have skill too, right? And can do things that most guys in the lineup can't do. I wonder, someone suggested it earlier, I wonder if it is worth a look to look at that Duchesne with Johansson and Forsberg, and do something different with Arvidsson. I mean, but if you're going to do that, then you got to give him more run.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to have more run if he's going to be out there. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And look, Matt Duchesne certainly has his shortcomings. I don't think there's any question about that. And he has not been very good since he signed with the Predators. The production has been nowhere near where it needs to be. But if you're going to play him and you're going to put him out there, and you need players in this series that can make some big-time plays. I thought he had a great pass last night to Haula to set up the goal. I thought Johansson had a great pass last night to set up Forsberg for the goal. Like, to me, you got to find a way to build on some of those things. And you get halfway through the second period last night, and I was sitting there watching the game, and I was wondering, like, okay, where's Matt Duchesne? Like, why is he not on the ice a little bit more? So I'm very interested to see how they handle that as they move forward here, because this is going to be something where, yes, you want to be physical. Yes, there's a certain style of play that you're going to try to have against Carolina, but you also have to recognize that Carolina is so good defensively that you need highly skilled players to make some plays. Like Philip Forsberg last night, he's the only guy the Predators have that makes that play and scores that goal. I'm sorry, he is. He's the only guy that the Predators have on their roster that can score the goal that he scored last night. You need those guys out there as much as possible against this Carolina team.
Yeah, and that's the case for Tolvanen too. Is just it hasn't gone well lately for him. There are shortcomings. You're giving something up to have him in there, but just one filthy one-timer could make the difference in a game. And you got to have people who can do that stuff too. You can't just be a burly hockey team and think you're going to beat a team that good.
When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Predators, taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Listen to the game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen for keywords at 9, noon, and at 3 o'clock. And when you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Talking Preds, their loss in Game 1 to the Carolina Hurricanes. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text line as well. Driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Let's go to the phone line and welcome in Rob from Franklin, who wants to weigh in on Matt Duchene. Rob, thanks for calling in to Robby and Rexrode.
Hey, thanks and good morning, gents. The one thing that I noticed around Duchene's game is that he does break into the zone really, really well. He comes in, pulls up, and then looks for a nice pass and or routes it accordingly. What he doesn't do, and what I'm sure Hines has an issue with, is his defensive zone coverage loses people constantly, and he doesn't get dirty inside our defensive zone. Inside our blue line, on the boards, he loses a player, and inevitably they end up in a good scoring position. Although he didn't hurt us badly last night, in the last 4 or 5 important games where people were really digging in, he lost people in front of the net. And once you lose a coach's confidence for that type of thing, it's hard to gain it back. And it's really hard to gain it back when now potentially, you have 3 games left in the season and you need defensive responsibility in the zone. I don't know what you guys think of that, but that's my take on it.
Hey, thanks for the call, Rob. We appreciate it. I mean, I think that's a great point. And what comes to mind immediately when Rob says that, I think back to the Columbus game where essentially Matt Duchene got benched, and it came right after a play where he loses somebody in the defensive zone. He doesn't close out quick enough, and all of a sudden Columbus has tied the game. They go on to win the game in the third period a little bit later. Joe, I mean, I do think, and I don't think this is a huge surprise, there is some give and take when it comes to Matt Duchene. He can make some good plays for you. He is not the greatest in the defensive zone, and I think that has been something that's really been the story of his career so far. He's never been just this shutdown centerman that you want, and I know right now he's playing on the wing as well, and there are some different responsibilities. You would think playing on the wing, your defensive responsibilities get eased up a little bit rather than playing down the middle where you're responsible for the middle of the ice and there's a whole lot more going on. But to Rob's point there have been instances where Duchene has lost people in the D zone, and I wonder how much of that is kind of influencing the lack of playing time that Duchene is getting 5-on-5.
I think it's a great point, and I think that's definitely part of it. And look, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, based on action and some based on comments you can read into a little bit. I don't think Duchene is John Hines' favorite player on this roster. I think and I don't know if it's more punitive or just like I can't have that out there right now, but a lot during this whole turnaround was made of, John Hines pointing out over and over again, especially to his veteran forwards, like, look at these stars and what they do, apart from, the offensive stuff. Look at how they perform in their defensive zone and look at the physicality they play with, things like that. Like, these are great players, and yet they do these gritty things too that help their team win. Why can't you guys do that? And I don't think Duchene's ever going to be exactly the guy he wants, but he can still be better. I mean, sometimes you got to block a shot, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to do the job in your defensive zone. So I don't know if there's one player on this roster, I just feel like John Hines seems to go back to over and over again in terms of sitting or just, not sure what to do with them. It would be Duchene. And I thought going into the series, Duchene was going to be a really important figure. I still do. I mean, I think they need his skill to come through. He helped create one goal, one of the 2 goals they scored. So there's value to having him, but they've got to come to an agreement on what all he needs to do to get more ice time.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, should Carrier be with Yossi to free him up some? Ellis has become a liability. We have seen John Hines kind of tinker, and a lot of this has been due to necessity with injury with the D pairs. I mean, we've seen Yossi play with Matt Benning and Ekholm go back with Ryan Ellis. We've seen Yossi play with Alex Carrier at times. Right now, it's Yossi Ellis, and Ekholm is playing with Alex Carrier. I didn't think Carrier had a particularly good night last night either, but I'm not as married to the Yossi Ellis defense pairing as I've been in the past. Like, we've seen Yossi get away from that and still play pretty well. And not only does he play well, he has a tendency to elevate whoever he's playing with. And I like, for the most part, Ellis being with Ekholm because you know pretty much Ekholm is going to stay at home and he's going to be there. He's going to be reliable. I think that frees up Ellis a little bit more as well. So, in years past in a playoff series, I would say there's pretty much no chance that they're going to take Yossi and Ellis off a pairing together. I don't necessarily feel that way this year. I do think that John Hines could take a look at maybe putting Ellis back with Ekholm and maybe putting Carrier up with Yossi, or maybe Benning comes in the lineup and he plays with Yossi as well. I mean, there's a couple of different options that you can take if you're John Hines. Now, I can tell you what's not going to happen. They're not going to make Ryan Ellis a healthy scratch. We've seen some of that today on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. That's not going to happen. They're not going to make him a scratch. But I think in years past, there wasn't much flexibility in terms of where you're going to slot these defensemen. I don't feel the same way about that this year. I do think there's a chance that maybe Ellis and Ekholm get reunited at some point in this series.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, honestly. I mean, Yossi Ellis, they've been on the ice for quite a few goals, in postseasons, recent postseasons. I think there's a definite case to be made to split that up. It's just like with the forwards. There's so much focus on Tolvanen, Jeannot, all the herd line, but I'm looking at Granlund, Cunningham. Don't want to overreact. One game, but I think you got to look at the whole thing and maybe come up with some different combinations in this game. I think it's good to keep an open mind on what Hines might do. I am assuming he's going to do something, even though he really kind of poo-pooed the idea that lineup was a worthwhile discussion last night. I still think he's gonna. I mean, how many coaches lose in a playoff game and don't do something? I think he's gonna do something, but yeah, maybe some of those things that aren't as obvious would be the way to go. I mean, the defense core has got to have something different.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Brian texted in, what are your thoughts on Arvidsson? How do you assess his play coming back for his first game last night? I mean, I thought he was largely invisible for the most part. He had a nice redirection that almost found its way to the back of the net, but there was never a time in the game last night, Joe, where I sat there and thought, okay, well, that is like vintage Victor Arvidsson. Look, he's been injured. It takes a while to get your feet back underneath you, and unfortunately, if you're the Predators, you don't have very long to wait heading into a playoff series, especially a playoff series against the number one seed in the Central Division. So I didn't think he was all that impressive last night. Maybe that's a move you consider making. But, I mean, it's his first game back from injury. My expectations for Victor Arvidsson in his first game coming back into the playoffs weren't really all that high to begin with.
Yeah, there wasn't much there. And I think if you look at him, we talked yesterday, he was my X factor. And I mentioned, the bubble. He had 3 goals in 4 games. That was also after a 5-month break to get totally healthy. And it just seems more and more that Arvidsson gets banged up. People beat him up. People go after him. They target him. And by the time you get to this time of year, he's diminished to some point. And I think that has happened in other postseasons, and it looks like it now too. So you can't count on you're not going to get that long break to get totally healthy and have that burst that he had in Edmonton, ever again before a postseason. And I don't know. It's another player like Ellis. Like, of course he's going to be in the lineup. You need what he does. He just hasn't done enough of that in the playoffs, and I don't know what the answer is to spring him loose.
Coming up next, we've got some tickets to give away for Game 3 of this round against the Carolina Hurricanes coming up on Friday. Another trivia question from the Honorable Ryan Porth coming your way next. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We'll have Preds TV analyst Chris Mason coming up at 8:30. We'll break down Game 1 with him. Look ahead to Game 2 as well. What adjustments would we like to see the Predators make? All that coming up later this hour. Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports joins us to begin the 9 o'clock hour as well. So all that coming up today, as well as taking your thoughts on our phone and text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And as we do every day this week at 8 o'clock, we've got some tickets to give away for the Nashville Predators and their home playoff games. Game 3 tickets to give away today, a pair of tickets with a trivia question by our very own Ryan Porth. If you know the answer to this trivia question, be the first texter at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ryan Porth, what is today's trivia question for a chance to win a pair of tickets to Game 3 coming up on Friday?
It's the first texter.
Yes.
Not caller.
Yes.
Or person to tweet in or whatever. So the first texter to the text line. So looking at Preds playoff history, Philip Forsberg last night scored his 27th career playoff goal for the Preds, which is by far first all-time in playoff history for the Preds in goals scored. There are 2 Predators tied for second on that list with 14 goals in their playoff history with the Nashville Predators. Which 2 players are tied for second behind Philip Forsberg?
So which 2 Predators players in playoff history are tied for second in goals behind Philip Forsberg? If you know that answer, text into the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. The first person who correctly guesses the answer will win a pair of tickets to Game 3 between the Predators and the Hurricanes coming up on Friday. So we'll update you on that a little bit later. Get those texting fingers going if you know the answer to today's trivia question. Joe, let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Eamon from Franklin, who wants to weigh in. Eamon, thanks for calling in to Robby and Rexrode.
Thank you for having me, guys. I just wanted to talk really quickly about kind of the discrepancy behind the way that we're looking at play of the first pair, who obviously they made a lot of mistakes last night, but I feel like there's some warranted discussion about the play of the bottom pairing too. I'm not going to be too hard on them. They're a bottom pairing. They're not out there to light it up or anything, but I think we saw the difference in foot speed between these 2 teams exploited pretty heavily on that bottom pair. I think Eric Branson's probably a wonderful presence in the locker room, and he does a lot of things that this team likes, but it might be ideal in this matchup to play somebody like Matt Benning on the bottom pair rather than him because he's got the foot speed to compete along the outside. We saw Harper get burned pretty badly a couple of times too. So I think that's where John Hynes should maybe make his easiest lineup changes, is put some people in there who can deal with guys going wide along the wing with speed. I'll hang up and listen to what you guys have to say.
Hey, thanks for the call. I mean, we appreciate it. I mean, I think that's a great point. I think that was obvious at times last night too, that the foot speed Carolina has was a problem, especially for that third pairing. I mean, we talked about that third goal by Niederreiter where Harper's kind of pinching up. He's trying to shut the play down at the blue line, and he just gets torched on the play. Branson's late coming over. He doesn't take away the shot. He doesn't take away the pass. Saros somehow makes the save on that shot by Trocheck, and then the rebound comes. 5 Predators are sitting there watching the play, and all of a sudden it's 3-2. Nino Niederreiter scores the goal. Joe, I think that's something that you've got to be mindful of if you're the Predators here. Yes, you want to be physical, and you want to be able to be difficult to play against, but you've also got to have the foot speed to not just get torched going wide like the Predators did a couple of times last night. That's a very tough balance to try to figure out. But again, I go back to, if you're going to try to trot, Ben Harper and Eric Goodbranson out there, to me, the more ideal time to do that is when you're at home and you can better control the matchups rather than having Sebastian Aho just skate past Ben Harper like he's not even there, like we saw in the third period last night.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fair. And look, I don't know that a Benning Fabro or whatever combination you want to come up with for the third pairing is going to make a difference last night. I mean, it's just like, again, to the point of the car, it's a third pairing. You're trying to steal ice time and not get exposed, with those guys. Most teams, that's the position they're in. And so I mean, I think for Preds fans, Fabro, of course, it's to a lesser extent of Tolvanen. It's like, wait a minute, this is one of our young, promising players. Why is he not in the lineup? Like what is like you want to see guys like that who you hope are going to be part of this franchise for a long time to be involved, especially 2 years after Fabro was actually a revelation in a series against Dallas. It was fresh out of college. But I don't know that is going to make any difference either. I would agree with you that, when you have last change, you can control that a little bit better. And then you can maybe get some of that physicality you want of those guys without really paying for it as much. So that's another interesting choice for John Hines here. And I don't know what's going on with Fabro exactly, but I was not terribly surprised that he was not part of this lineup.
I wasn't surprised either, but that is concerning that we've reached this point with Dante Fabro where Ben Harper and Eric Goodbranson are starting game one of a playoff series, and Dante Fabro is not a part of it. Now, I realize there have been some injuries that have happened recently, and I don't know if he's back up to full speed at this point. But I think it's concerning that here we are, we sit in Dante Fabro in his second full season in the NHL, but his third playoff run with this team is not a part of the lineup as game one begins. To me, that's concerning not only for him now in the present, that's also concerning about what is the future going to look like with Dante Fabro, who we thought was going to be a pretty massively important piece of this organization as they move forward here. He's 22 years old, so it's not like you just have to totally give up on him at this point. But I do think it's pretty concerning that game one has come and gone and Fabro is not in the lineup.
And by the way, not to pour salt in anyone's wound, but I thought Sam Girard looked all right last night.
He's pretty good.
I was watching that game.
He's pretty good.
Oh boy. Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah, it's still very early. And it's like with Tolvanen, we're sitting there before the season starts saying, man, is Tolvanen ever going to figure it out? Wait, how old is he? Oh, he's 21. Yeah. And he has. And then, he's had this setback recently and we'll see. But I still think overall there's a very positive trend here with Tolvanen as far as a guy who could actually be a long-term key player. Yeah, I think you have to be a little bit questioning that with Fabro at this point, but still very young. Probably would be really good for him to be able to get into this lineup and do something positive. But if you're John Hines, I mean, you're not making choices right now to help a player, develop for the future or whatever. You're trying to win a hockey game any way you can figure it out.
Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Adam from North Carolina who wants to weigh in. Adam, just for clarification's sake, you are a Predators fan, right?
Yeah, bro.
There we go.
I moved here a couple of years ago. I'm a native Nashvilleian and Preds fan. First thing, let me tell you, I don't believe anything coming out of Carolina. That game was not sold out. There were tickets available from the box office hours before the game. But anyways, I thought we looked a little nervous. We saw Forsberg kind of whiff on a couple passes, a couple shots even. Yossi it was one of the early power plays in the first period, was trying to, get into the zone. I think it was at our blue line, just whiffed on a pass. I thought we were kind of squeezing the stick a little bit, and I expect us to kind of settle down, get into our game in game two, and grind it out. We don't have the horses. We don't have, we're gonna win this series with X's and O's. We don't really have the Jimmies and Joes to go toe to toe with Carolina. We're gonna grind it out if we're gonna win the series. We might be able to outclass them for one game, but I don't think we're gonna win 4 doing that. Have a good one, boys.
Hey, thanks for the call, Adam. Appreciate it. I mean, I think to Adam's point there, if you're trying to just go the line up and go toe-to-toe and trade chances with Carolina and go skill on skill, this is going to be a very short series. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. Now, there's a balance to that. It can't be. I still think last night's lineup was a mistake. I mean, you can't just go all physical either. You've got to have a balance there. But to Adam's point, like if you're trying to line up and just go skill for Carolina, this is not going to work out very well for the Predators. And I don't know if it was nervousness or not, but Yossi flubbed the puck a couple of times. Forsberg did coming into the zone one time as well. I mean, I don't know if it was the ice conditions or what it was, but it was strange, the Predators mishandling the puck a couple of times early in that game, and then it seemed to settle down a little bit as the game went on.
Maybe we can be like Pittsburgh media and blame their crappy ice.
Maybe so.
These hockey newbies in Carolina with their bad ice.
Don't know how to make a proper ice sheet. Yeah.
Should we also be like Pittsburgh and blame them for pumping in crowd noise?
Maybe so. Instruments of crime.
Instruments of crime.
Adam doubted the crowd there, so I don't know. They seemed all right. They seemed okay to me, but that's interesting on the tickets thing. I saw some Preds fans in there.
Yeah,
sounded loud and definitely looked close to 100% in the lower bowl.
Ryan Porth, do we have an update on today's trivia question? Is there a winner to go to Game 3 of the first round?
We do have a winner, and not many people got this correct.
I didn't get it correct.
So the trivia question was Forsberg leads the Preds in all-time playoff goals with 27. There are two players tied at 14 behind him. Who are the two players? And Evan in Nashville correctly guessed James Neal and Ryan Johansson as the two at 14 behind Philip Forsberg.
James Neal and Ryan Johansson. I think my guess was David Legwand and Shea Weber. So 0 for 2 for Robbie Stanley in that guess.
Good job.
Very nicely done. Congratulations, Evan. Hope you enjoyed Game 3 coming up on Friday. Very good trivia question by Ryan Porth. We'll have more tickets to give away each day at 8 o'clock this week here on Robby and Rexrode. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Predators. Got a lot of your thoughts to get to on our text line as well, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
The Carolina Hurricanes get 3 third-period goals and win Game 1 by a 5-2 score.
The third period wasn't really our strongest period. I thought we started off the game pretty good. Then second period, we kind of sat back a couple penalties that kind of got our momentum off, and that's something that we obviously need to do a better job of, taking too many penalties. And Killers are doing a great job, but they're killing too much, so that's something that we need to improve on going forward. But then the third, I feel like we had a couple chances, but we didn't get that pushback that we wanted, especially after their first one.
That was Philip Forsberg after the game last night, a 5-2 loss for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes, discussing the penalties taken last night. And Joe, it was, I thought as that game went along, kind of playing with fire a little bit. Some tripping penalties, some holding penalties, hooking penalties, a little bit of stick discipline that was a problem last night. Forsberg had a high sticking penalty as well. So not really penalties that you credit to being overly physical or anything like that, more stick fouls that you've got to find a way to control as you move forward here if you're the Predators, because even though the penalty kill did a great job last night, I thought they were really good against that Carolina power play. That's not really a game you want to continue to play against Carolina, a top 3 team, not only in the penalty kill in the regular season, but the power play as well. So a good job by the penalty kill last night, but Joe, if they continue to take as many penalties as they did, probably not going to like the end result of that at the end of this series.
No, eventually they'll make you pay. And that was I think, a natural question that Jared asked the question, and nothing wrong with the question, for the record. Jared, good job. But I mean, I think John Hines answered it. I mean, these were not overly, over-exuberant physicality penalties. I mean, at least a couple of them where you got beat and you had to, commit. I mean, Yossi got beat, and I don't even remember who the heck that was, but he had to grab him.
I think it was Brock
to stop
McGinn,
him from.
yeah.
It was McGinn. That's right. McGinn had a few bursts on them last night. So it was not the this big burly lineup is going overboard stuff. It was a couple bad luck penalties in there, like you will get, and some of it was just like, oh, there goes fill-in player's name, and you're gonna have to do something to slow him down.
Now, having said that, the lineup was a big topic of discussion last night, both before the game when the warm-ups were out there and the lineup was announced, and also after the game as well. You have Eeli Tolvanen out. You have Goodbranson and Harper on the third pair. Olivier back in the lineup, and Tanner Jeannot moving up to the third line. Joe, what did you think of the lineup decisions last night for the Predators? Do you think that had any factor whatsoever in terms of the Predators losing in Game 1?
I have a bigger concern. We're going to talk about the third pairing, and I think it merits a look. But I have a bigger concern about Yossi and Ellis. There's a lot of talk about Tolvanen. Again, I think that deserves a look. But I have a bigger concern that the second line did absolutely nothing. So I'm not saying there's nothing to it. There's something to it. But if you honestly watched that 60-minute hockey game and came away thinking, man, Benning, Fabro, and Tolvanen would have made all the difference, I have to question what you were looking at. It's one of those things, one of those two things being true. I don't think it was the ideal lineup, and I think it needs to be changed. But I think the key guys in this lineup who we know are going to be in no matter what, they've got to change. They've got to play better.
Well, I think so, too. I did have a problem with the lineup in terms of I think at some point you can go kind of too far one direction, and I thought the Predators lineup, I looked at it in the bottom 6 especially last night, and I thought to myself, all right, so where are the scoring threats going to come from? Like who's going to be out there that consistently you feel good about this line can be a scoring threat? Now, they did get a goal last night from the bottom 6. Eric Hollis scores a goal last night. I thought he played pretty well for the most part. Apparently, he's public enemy number 1 in Raleigh, North Carolina, which we didn't know about heading into this series, but now we do. So we'll see what happens on that front in Game 2. So I didn't love the lineup last night. I've made my thoughts on the Harper-Goodbranson pairing pretty clear at this point. I don't think there's any excuse for Eric Goodbranson to be in the lineup. I don't really think that there's any excuse for Harper to be in the lineup other than I'm not sure anybody else can play the left side. So that may just be what you're stuck with at this point. So I did not like the decision to put Eric Goodbranson in there. But to your point, I also didn't come away from that game last night thinking to themselves, well, the lineup is why they lost the game. Carolina just showed that they were the better team in the second part of that game. And if you're the Predators, I do think there will be some lineup changes heading into Game 2. How many, I don't know. I mean, at some point this series, you're going to see Eeli Tolvanen. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Like, I don't foresee a way that he's just going to be out this entire series. So you're going to see him at some point, whether that's Game 2 or somewhere else down the line. But I don't think that bringing in a guy like Fabro or bringing in somebody like Tolvanen just automatically makes all the difference as they move forward here. They've got to find a way to get out of their zone a little bit better. They've got to find a way to disrupt that forecheck of Carolina. And as we know, if you've watched Carolina play this year, that is a whole lot easier said than done. And, Joe, I think you described it earlier. The game last night started to look a whole lot more like the 6 games that we saw in the regular season. It looked much more like that than it did the last 2 we saw to close out the regular season for the Predators against Carolina. And that, to me, is very concerning as they move forward here throughout the rest of this series.
Exactly. I mean, look, I would say that like a Benning makes sense, a little bit more foot speed, right? I do think Tolvanen, the case for Tolvanen is just that Tolvanen can do some things that not everybody can do. And you've got to, I think watching that game last night, I just can't envision a bunch of 2-1 games coming up here.
No.
You know? And if that's not the case, then I think you've got to have every bit of firepower you can have, even if you're sacrificing something else. You can make a case for like a Brad Richardson, who I thought, played well when he came off injury. That's who I thought actually was going to be on that third line. And he went with Tanner Jeannot. I didn't have a problem with Jeannot. I thought Jeannot did well. I think Jeannot's played well every night out for this team. But is that what you need? Do you need to try to have more skill? And especially, as you pointed out earlier in the show, Robbie, if you're going to play Matt Duchene that sparingly, and then Granlund in that line is going to create and generate nothing, man. How are you keeping up on the scoreboard?
Well, I mean, it got to a point last night where it just kind of felt like if it wasn't going to be Forsberg from the forward group, then it wasn't going to be anybody. And that's what we saw from this team earlier in the season, and that's not a good way to play. I mean, you don't have a big margin for error if you're the Predators against Carolina. I thought Forsberg looked pretty good last night for the most part. That Joe Feline, I mean, they had their moments. There's still another level that they're going to have to get to. I guess the question now is, how much different does the lineup look in Game 2? And if you have a bad game, which I think we all would agree that Granlund line did not look good, they've been dynamite coming down the stretch for this Predators team. How much patience does John Hines show here with Yarncroke, Granlund, and Cunnin? Because I agree with you. I thought they were largely invisible last night. And I don't know if I would just break them up right away, but you're also in a 7-game series. You can't exercise a ton of patience either.
Right. And sorry, that was Quinn barking in the background.
It's okay.
Well, and that's the thing. They've been so good, so consistently good. I think it would be a little bit panicky to break it up after one game. But I have to say, after that game, that's one of the first things I thought of was, gosh, they look like this looks like the classic. Here's what we are in the regular season, and now here's what we are in the postseason. And there's been just too much of that for the Preds in general over the last few years, where you're something here, and now you get into the playoffs and you disappear.
102.5 The Game will be on the road with your chance to win tickets for games 3 and 4 for round run of the playoffs for the Hurricanes and the Preds. Tomorrow, Stillman Company will be broadcasting live at the new Party Foul location in Cool Springs from 2 to 6 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to Game 4. And on Thursday, Stillman Company will be broadcasting live at Social Furniture from 2 to 6 for your chance to win a pair of tickets to Game 3 and a pair to Game 4 as well. So make sure you're tuned in all week long for that. Stillman Company's got you covered tomorrow and on Thursday as well. When we come back, we'll be joined by Preds TV analyst Chris Mason. We'll break down Game 1, look ahead to Game 2 with him. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. And it's that time of the week. We go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Preds TV analyst Chris Mason, brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops. C-Mace, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
Not too bad. How you guys doing?
We are doing wonderful. Appreciate you taking time to join us this morning. C-Mace, obviously a tough loss for the Predators last night, behind the 8 ball now in the series against the Hurricanes. What stood out to you from the Predators' standpoint in Game 1?
Well, I just felt that they couldn't keep them in the type of game that they wanted to long enough. And, that's going to be an issue with, the speed of Carolina and the way that they are able to break out of their own zone. I don't think the Predators were able to really initiate enough of the forecheck and attack. And I think it's a lot of times because they spent too much time defending. So by the time they get the puck out of the zone, they've got to chip it in and go for a change. And then Carolina's transition game is just one of the best in the league. And I think, there were times, I think, when that third pair got exploited as well with some of the speed of Aho and Teravainen and those types of high-end players that they had. They just weren't able to contain them and really get them to play their type of game. And although they were able to do a good job on the penalty kill, I thought 5-on-5 as that game went on, Carolina's skill and speed and just depth maybe separated a little bit.
So, C-Mace, what would be the best adjustment at this point? Is there an adjustment? Is the lineup, something that can significantly help the Preds if they went to more skill maybe or change the third pairing? What would you say the best next move here is for John Hynes?
Well, I think they're going to obviously evaluate. I suspect there will be some changes just to see how that first game went. There's probably, like I said, there's probably more special teams than everybody expected. Each team had, I think, 4, if I'm not mistaken. But I think, if it's going to be like that and if that's something that you're going to see, I think, Eeli Tolvanen's a guy that would probably be first up and, a difference maker, obviously, on the power play with his shot. I think maybe Tolvanen was playing the best hockey down the stretch, and that's likely why the lineup decision was made not to start him. But he's a guy that could have helped on the power play. And then I thought the third pair, as I said, especially in Carolina, because you don't have the matchup control. You get last change, so Carolina really was able to dictate who they put out against that third pair. And I think sometimes the speed was just a little too much for them. But you could maybe predict a change on that pairing too. I mean, you have Fabro and Benning, and who I thought Benning was playing really good. The last couple months of the season, really solid, a little quicker, not as big or strong, but he can hold his own in that area. And then Dante Fabro, probably the most skilled of the 4 players that would be in the lineup there. So he's an option as well.
C-Mace, obviously a pretty tough spot for Saros on that first goal by Jordan Staal that gave the Canes a 2-1 lead. First off, you'd like to see one of Ekholm, Yossi, or Johansson put a body on Staal and take him out of the play. But you're also, if you're Saros, you're trying to take away the pass on the backside too, and left a little bit of the net open. A great shot by Jordan Staal on that play as well. Just from a goaltender's perspective, what's that like when you've got a guy that's got a tough angle shot, that it's going to have to be a perfect shot to beat you, but you've also got somebody streaking down the back door as well and trying to take away that middle of the ice? What's that position like as a goaltender, and how tough is it not to try to cheat the other way?
Well, that was kind of a unique situation because I know exactly what Saros was thinking on that one. He thought, the puck kind of got away from Staal, so he had to extend and he lost the puck for a second. So, you percentage-wise, you're thinking, well, he's just going to grab it. He's not going to be in a good shooting position. He's going to try to hit the guy going, streaking down the middle. For a backdoor pass or whatever. So, and that's kind of how it looked. And Staal, I think, realized once he got that puck that he actually had more time than, he probably should have, especially after losing it. And then Saros completely turned. So he was cheating to get ready to push to the middle of the ice to try to take away that backdoor option. But then Staal just had enough time and he positioned his body and he made a great shot. But and that's, as a goaltender, you look at that goal and you know exactly what, you should have done. Every goal, no matter, sometimes we'll say on air, Saros had no chance or this or that, but when you're a goalie, you think you should stop every single puck, no matter if it's the nicest play that you let in. And that's one, though, that I think he would definitely like back. You're trying to gather all the information that's put forth in front of you and then anticipate, what's going to happen on the play. And he anticipated wrong there and left a lot of net, and Staal did make a beautiful shot, but Saros was almost already moving towards the pass. So that was a tough one, but you got to credit Staal for an amazing play.
Chris, that Granlund line has been so big for this team over a long stretch here, and a big part of why this team is in the postseason. Did not see much from them last night. What did you see from them? And would you, I don't know, would you consider, I know it's very early, it's one game, but maybe changing something up there?
You know, I think I agree with what you said about being one game. There's a lot that goes into this. I mean, you have an 8-day break. You know, you have a bunch of practice time. You know, you kind of have to recapture that feeling that you had at the end of the season, and you know, you're practicing. It's not like you're playing games and you're on a roll. It's something that I think you need to kind of let breathe. You know, I think if it continues to kind of feel that way in game 2, I think that's when you can make adjustments. You know, to a line that has really been a main staple and been extremely valuable to the Preds down the stretch. I think you don't just start shuffling lines around right now. Obviously, he could if he chose to, but I think they'll give him another opportunity. And the bottom line is, you know, when you're looking at the series and it's, you know, that emotional roller coaster that you go through, you go down to Carolina, you want to split. You obviously want to win both games, but you know, you also have to be realistic about it. And it's a tough place to win. And I think, you know, if you start juggling the lines and get guys thinking about who they're playing with and that type of thing, I think that could cause a little bit of a distraction instead of saying, all right, boys, we're going to give you another shot here. You know, you guys were great down the stretch. Let's see if we need you guys. If we're going to beat the Carolina Hurricanes, we're going to need you guys to play at the level that you're playing at, you know, the last 2 months of the season. So I don't expect any changes there, but again, I could be wrong.
Preds TV analyst Chris Mason on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com and brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops as well. C-Mace, Jofa reunited last night, the top line. Arvidsson coming back into the fold as well. What did you think of Johansson, Forsberg, and Arvidsson's performance in Game 1?
I thought they were good. I thought they were probably the best line, to be honest with you. I thought, you know, especially at the start of the game, I thought they were better at the start. I thought they were able to, you know, play a heavy game. I thought Johansson was engaged early, and Forsberg, I thought he looked pretty good all game. And Arvidsson, I thought there were some moments. He had some good moments with his, you know, his hustling ability, and it looks like he's getting to the net pretty hard. So I think that's a line that they're really going to need to step up. But I thought Phil looked really good. I thought Johansson might have tailed off a little bit at the end of the game. Wasn't quite as noticeable, and you know, you need him, especially in the face-off circle, to be dominant and to try to contribute in that department too. And Carolina is one of the best face-off teams in the league, so that's a battle that they definitely won that helped them last night. But I thought Jofa was good. I thought they were the best line probably for the team.
Any surprise at all, C-Mace, in how Carolina responded to the physicalities? I thought the first period was a great period, and it was an even period, but it was also, there was a lot of message sending. I felt like a lot of big hits. I thought Carolina really responded to that, and I know the Preds, you know, that's how they want to play. But I guess, were you surprised at all or impressed at all with how Carolina got into that and you know, established themselves as well?
No, I was impressed, and I wasn't surprised because I know that, you know, Rod Brind'Amour is that type of player, and they take on that type of hard-working mentality no matter what the situation. And I expected it, to be honest. It's Game 1. Everybody's ready to go. Carolina's the favorite. They've got to come out. They're playing in their home arena. That doesn't surprise me that they were able to do that. But, you know, if this series is going to be long, I think that's when you're going to see the Predators sway in that department, if they can do it. I mean, it's not easy to get Carolina to play that game and to keep the game that way because of their skill level, and they are one of the best, most talented teams in the league. So it's tough to keep a team that good into that type of hockey for 60 or 60-plus minutes. But I think if the Preds can, you know, extend this series and turn it into a long series, I think you'll see that physicality advantage shift towards the Predators. But the first couple games, and especially at home for Carolina, you know, I expect them not to back down, and they didn't. You know, they did a good job going toe-to-toe with the Preds in that department.
Preds TV analyst Chris Mason has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops. C-Mace joins us every week here at Tuesday at 8:30. C-Mace, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Absolutely, you as well. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Predators. Get your thoughts on Game 2. Who's in? who's out of the lineup for Game 2. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Was it difficult to put this together, and did you consider that maybe it was, I don't know, too heavy of a lineup going into this game?
So, guys, look, we came in as 2-2 going in the third period, and you have to make lineup decisions. Back to Jared's question, we were physical. It was hard. It was a hard-fought game. It's 2-2 going in the third period, and you look at a couple of goals. They're breakdowns in the goals. One of them's the turnover. They come back in. It's a D-zone coverage goal. So I think when you look at those situations, it's we can talk all about the lineup we want, but we played physical. We played hard. It was a competitive game, and we didn't find a way to win one. So as we've said, we're going to be able to make lineup decisions that we want, but as we've gone all year long, it hasn't been who's in or who's out. It's how we've played. And today we didn't play well enough to win. I think when you look at the lineup as it's gone through, we played hard, but we have to stay out of the penalty box. Interference, trip, high stick, holding, and 2 unsportsmanlike conducts at the end. So it didn't have anything to do with that.
That was Predators head coach John Hynes after the game last night, a Game 1 loss for the Predators against the Carolina Hurricanes, discussing the lineup. Now, Joe, I hear him talking there about the lineup changes, saying it's 2-2 heading into the third period, and then there are some breakdowns that lead to some goals, and he is absolutely right about that. My counter-argument to that, though, would be, especially on that third goal by Niederreiter, who was on the ice and who is in the lineup leads directly to the breakdowns. You've got Erik Gudbranson and you've got Ben Harpur out there as well. Harpur comes up, makes a bad decision at the blue line. He gets torched on the outside. Gudbranson's late getting over. So you basically got two defensemen trying to take away a pass and a shot, and neither one of them are taking away a pass or a shot, and Saros somehow makes a save on that play, and then you got five guys standing around watching Niederreiter scores. So I hear what John Hynes is saying there, and he is right. It largely has not mattered who's been in the lineup for the Predators during their stretch. They won 20 out of 28 to get in the playoffs. They've been able to do it with different lineups. But I did look at that lineup last night on that third D pair and some of the decisions made in the bottom six and think to myself, man, you better hope that they don't get caught out in space, because if you do, you're going to get in a track meet, and Erik Gudbranson and Ben Harpur not prepared to handle a track meet with Carolina. So, look, I hear what John Hynes is saying. I don't think he's necessarily wrong that it hasn't mattered who's been in there, but I can tell you at least one goal that happened last night that it absolutely mattered who was in the lineup, and that was Erik Gudbranson and Ben Harpur.
Right. So if it's Fabro and Benning, is it markedly different? Maybe it is. I mean, those guys are in the lineup. I mean, look, I feel like Hynes has a different opinion of Gudbranson than you do.
That is for sure.
Feel confident in saying that. This is like, I'm trying to think of Erik Gudbranson is to you who who would be like Jared's most hated player. Like you are.
I'm sure he's a great
guy.
You
are very. Yeah, right. Sure. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Honestly, man, I was so ready to come in here today and say, did you see the poke check from Gudbranson? That was a heck of a play. He did make a couple nice plays.
He did.
They went size. Hynes went size, obviously, there. Those guys are both huge and gave up something in return. I feel like, your third defense pairing is – that happens a lot, right? You get caught and you're in trouble. But that was a direct example of that particular decision not working out. I would think that there'd be something different there. I would think Tolvanen would be in the lineup too in game 2, although I don't know that I'm convinced of that. It really comes down to some things we don't know, which is how lingering is the injury, or how much is that still affecting him? How much does that have to do with how he's looked since he came back? And then just how John Hynes looks at it in terms of, okay, still the goal here is to play a physical brand of hockey and force them into playing it too. But in the meantime, gosh, it'd be good to have a chance to score on the power play at some point. But if you can't set up, who cares anyway?
Yeah.
You can keep going around and around with this stuff. It's going to be really interesting to see where he goes.
Well, let me just say this. The lineup's going to look different in Game 2. I mean, I don't really see any way that they're going to come back with the same lineup in Game 2 after what just happened in Game 1. I think there will be some changes. I'm just fascinated to see, if Tolvanen's in there, where's he going to play? Like Chris Mason joined us in the last segment, said that the Johansson line was probably the best line for the Predators. I would agree with that. I still didn't think they were as good as they need that line to be, and I didn't think Arvidsson was anywhere near as noticeable as they need him to be if he's going to play on that line. So if Tolvanen's coming in, do you put him on that top line and move Arvidsson down to the third line? Do you take Matthew Olivier out and move Jeannot back down to the fourth? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And honestly, Joe, I got to say, I do wonder if this continues going the way that it is right now, and Matt Duchene is barely playing 5-on-5. He's got 7 minutes, 5-on-5, 10 minutes total in the game. Is there a point where he's a healthy scratch? It's obvious that John Hynes does not fully trust him out there. Does there come a point in this series, if it continues this way, where Matt Duchene is a healthy scratch? That's not something that I really entertained heading into this series, watching that game unfold the way it did last night, that's something that's starting to creep into my mind about whether or not he could be a healthy scratch. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not going to totally remove that off the table.
Well, I think that'd be a mistake. It'd also be a kind of an indication of where things are probably going here.
Yeah.
With the Preds and Matt Duchene, if they can go in that direction, of course. But I think that'd be a mistake. I mean, one of their 2 goals he created with a really nice play. And I think, I frankly, I think that you'd rather see him have more opportunities than fewer so that this team can generate more offense. But look, if he's not playing the way that Hines has set, he set a bar, he set a standard, made it very clear, and in particular with his forwards on all the different things they need to do for this team to play the kind of style it needs to play to win. If he's flat out not doing that, well, then again, you're going to have a problem. But I look at this lineup, and this is why I think I'd throw Tolvanen in there too. Any players you have on your side who can make plays on their own, who can come in and generate some offense for you, I think that's going to be an increasing priority here, because I just don't know how you're going to realistically slow that team down the way you want to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll come right out in game 2 and the first period will be replicated for 3 periods Wednesday night, and they can win a 2-1 game. But to me, I think you're going to end up erring on the side of more skill to try to keep up.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. David texted in, what about Rocco? He just makes things happen out there. Another person on the text line suggesting that Rocco comes in place of Victor Arvidsson because Rocco has more speed. Look, I don't envision them taking Arvidsson out of the lineup at this point. I think they're going to wait and see what he looks like, trying to get back up to full speed as this series goes along here. I don't know. What do you think's more likely? Do you think it's more likely Tolvanen's back in there or that Rocco comes in? He looked pretty good in the last game against Carolina in the regular season. He does have speed that Tolvanen doesn't have. He also is not nearly the weapon on the power play that Eeli Tolvanen could be as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't bring the sandpaper that obviously is a priority for Hines. Look, I don't hate it. Again, 2 years ago, he's their best forward. He makes things happen. He does have more burst right now than Arvidsson based on what we saw last night. So, I mean, I think you have to consider him as a possibility, but it just I would still not think that he would get in there. I mean, gosh, last night on the Bally Sports graphic, he didn't even get on the list of scratches, poor guy.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of them. There are a lot of tough choices here. Richardson, Cousins, a lot of different ways you could go. I think you can make a case for Rocco. I don't think that's where it's going to go.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Brandon from Columbia texting in, I don't want to see the Jofa line. It's not what it used to be. Look, I think there is something to that. Like that, the line is not as dangerous as it was in years past. I mean, I don't think there's really any way to deny that at this point. I mean, that was unquestionably not only the top line for the Predators, but I mean, Joe, they had a stretch there for about a year and a half where they were one of the top lines in the NHL, much less the Predators. I mean, every statistical measure that you want to break down, they were one of the top 5 lines in the entire league, and that's just not the case anymore. So, look, I don't know how much patience John Hines is going to have with it. I thought they were okay in Game 1. I'd not be surprised at all if they come out in Game 2 and that line is together once again. But they've got to find a way to take their game to a different level. Like you don't have the luxury in this series against Carolina to hang around and wait on that Jofa line to make a difference. They've got it. They're in a position with the skill set that they have and with the rest of this lineup in this matchup, you've got to get production out of Jofa on a nightly basis if they're going to be together.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it was worth a look, and they did some good things. But I would really think about a Duchene or a Tolvanen with Forsberg and Johansson.
Yep.
I mean, I think that, again, Duchene, though, you got to be committing to, like, playing Duchesne more and feeling like he can handle that. And then, with Tolvanen, obviously he's been up with those guys a lot. If he comes back in, that would be a natural spot for him. But maybe you're right. Maybe they'll try it another game. That's not the problem for me. Again, one game, so we overreact to one game. But I want to see way more from the Granlund line than we saw last night.
102.5 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword text in to win. Good luck from 102.5 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. When we come back, we'll be joined by Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports for our weekly chat with him on all things NFL. That's coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the wholesaling studios powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And as we do every Tuesday at 9 o'clock, let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports. Charles, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
I'm good. Just puddling around in the finally slowed down portion of the season. This has nothing to do with the appearance, but I can't get over this. So I was texting with an agent just about quarterbacks yesterday, and he brought up Chase Daniel and the fact that Chase Daniels made realized career earnings are nearly $38 million through last year, and he's played 5 NFL games.
Jeez.
Five games that count. So he said, and he said, yeah, he said it was a good year in 2009 for undrafted backup quarterbacks. So I go and I look, and Brian Hoyer from 2009, undrafted backup quarterback, same as Chase Daniel for the majority of his career. Brian Hoyer's realized nearly $30 million through the expanse of his career. Both will be playing in the league next year. It's a hell of a job if you can get a backup quarterback job and hang on. I'll tell you what. And this doesn't even take into account guys like Luke McCown and sort of stopgap starters who have just raked it over the years. But Chase Daniel, that's unbelievable. Five games, $38 million.
I mean, that's got to be like the best job in sports, right? Chase Daniel. Not having to do hardly anything, $38 million?
Maybe. Like, I don't know. You'd have to be you'd be hard-pressed to find someone whose role really over 12 years really truly was a backup, to be a supporter. You're in the quarterback room, you support the starter, and you're a stopgap measure in case anything happens. And I mean, I remember when the Eagles signed him in 2016, and the sort of idea behind it was, well, this is such a high level backup, and I'm kind of like looking at it, and I'm like, where did he prove it? Like, he's never played in the regular season. Like, some of these guys get labeled high level backups, and clearly, I remember covering the Lions and Ty Detmer being, this backup who really was never going to materialize into a starting quarterback for the Lions. When you talk to people in the locker room, you talk to people in the front office, they just talked about, how great he was in the quarterback room, how great he was in the support role. It's just kind of weird how these guys can develop, really lucrative long-term careers just being in these support roles. But you're right. I mean, Chase Daniel, I'd have to look at it. I mean, this is definitely one of the crazier five-game careers for nearly $38 million. And that's not even, he'll be in the league in 2021 and probably beyond. I mean, he could be a guy who plays, 15, 16 years as a backup.
And, Joe, that means that you've seen in person one of Chase Daniel's 5 starts. He played last year against the Titans for the Lions.
That's
Well,
right.
That's a rare.
Boy, was he good too? He was definitely good. he was pretty special. I'm not going to hear any Brian Hoyer slander now. But Brian Hoyer, he's earned his keep. Come on. Man.
Now I'll say this for Hoyer. He did. I think I looked at Hoyer's played 39 games, and there were times where he was leaned upon as a starter here in Houston. A little bit of a different situation, but for the most part, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're going to look at Brian Hoyer as being someone that was a career backup, Chase Daniel being a career backup. I'd be curious to look at. I will say this, for all the talk about how starting quarterback salaries have ballooned, backup quarterbacks are getting expensive in the NFL now, and that's why you see, like last year, part of the reason why the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts was because they really couldn't afford to go out and sign a backup quarterback. I mean, there was a talk in that building about, look, we can go try to sign a high-level backup, which we will need because Carson Wentz has gotten hurt so much over the course of his career. But that's going to cost us $6, $7, $8 million to have a high-level backup quarterback who can start games for us. Or we can just go draft a guy who's going to be far cheaper and who might develop into something that maybe we can trade down the line. Because, look, at the time, they thought they were still going to keep Carson Wentz. Well, obviously things go differently, but that's why the Jalen Hurts situation developed in Philadelphia was because they couldn't afford. They didn't feel like, salary-wise, they could afford a high-level backup who would come for 1 year on a contract really they felt like they could fit into their salary cap situation. So that's if you look at Jalen Hurts on the field this year and you're like, how did this guy end up starting? It was because they were trying to save some money on a backup quarterback situation, just went a completely different way.
Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, Charles, I feel like every time we have you on now, somehow the conversation turns to Urban Meyer and to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I want to talk to you about that again, because now rookie minicamp has come and gone, and Travis Etienne selected by the Jags in the first round, apparently taking all his reps over the weekend at wide receiver. And Urban Meyer went on a radio show as well, talked about how Travis Etienne could be the next Percy Harvin. What do you think about all this? What do you think about selecting him in the first round, and then all of a sudden he's changing positions at the rookie minicamp?
Well, I hope he's not the next Percy Harvin because, no offense to Percy Harvin, but that's someone that, didn't really, I think, realize what we all thought, he could be in the NFL. And you could say that's because of injuries and, obviously there were concussion issues with Percy Harvin and, a number of different things. But I don't know. It's uncharacteristic for most NFL coaches to look at an elite level 5'10", 210-pound running back and go, yeah, you know what, let's figure out a way to, use this guy as a wide receiver. Here's my thing with Urban, and I think I talked about this before, is just this idea of culture coaches coming out of college and, first off, going and grabbing for familiarity, going and grabbing for a number of guys that, in their minds, whether you want to talk about Tim Tebow or, other moves that Urban Meyer's made there. But even leaning on Percy Harvin. Okay, well, guess what? Percy Harvin was a far greater player in college for an Urban Meyer than he ever was in the NFL. He was never a fit guy in the NFL. There were a lot of problems, with Percy Harvin from a skill standpoint. And the NFL is not a league of tweeners. Like, we're not looking, when you talk to front offices, they're not looking for players that are hard, to fit into certain positions. And okay, look at this last draft. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, right? JOK, the kid from Notre Dame. Teams, everybody I talked to really liked him a lot. Like, they, someone said, hey, maybe his film's a little overrated, but they really loved the skill set he brought to the table, the speed, the way he hit, all these things. But they all said a lot of the same things that they used to say about Jabril Peppers when he came out of Michigan, which was, where do you put him? Like, is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Are we at the point now in the NFL where we can truly have sort of these hybrid middle tier, tweener players on defense like this and succeed with them? Or is it just too much finessing to try and figure out, where a guy fits? You don't want Travis Etienne in that position. There's no team that I talk to who's like, yeah, we're going to switch that guy to wide receiver. And I feel like Urban is making himself into a story because he's trying to reinvent the wheel right off the bat. And this is part of Urban, okay? There's no room that Urban's ever been in. And you can like him, you can hate him, you say whatever you want. But Urban is the guy who always feels like, hey, I'm smarter than anybody else in this room. And that's fine because he's had a lot of success on the college level. But that'll get you in trouble fast in the NFL, particularly when you think, hey, I can come in and go against the grain and start to, take certain players and put them, I'll bring in a Tim Tebow and think that that's not going to become a problem with the politics of a locker room in the NFL. Like, it would, forget the fact, you're switching him to tight end, but what about the politics of the locker room where there are guys in there who immediately are forming opinions going, are you serious? Like, they know what kind of a player Tim Tebow is. They know about the gap in time. They know about, you can say whatever you want about the roster spot that he's taking, whether it's the 90th guy or not. But they do have a need at tight end, and they do see a guy reaching for familiarity, which, develops thoughts of players in the locker room. So this is another thing where you're switching an elite level player, and I guarantee you there are guys in that locker room who are probably looking at him going, I don't know why we're doing this. Like, why are you taking a running back who's, clearly got the skill set to play that position, played it at a high level, played against high-level competition, and killed high-level competition there, and now you're trying to put him into this position to make him into some other player that you were familiar with. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I hope Urban gets off to a fast start, because he sure as heck is fiddling with things that could come back to haunt him. And I will say that with a grain of salt, because it is, let's not go overboard here, it is May. It is, we're at a time of the year where a lot of the stuff that's happening right now really truly doesn't matter. But if we get into training camp and Travis Etienne's a wide receiver, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about drafting him where you draft him just to change him into some other position at which there's more to it than you don't see a lot of lifelong running backs all of a sudden, hey, we're just going to throw you in a wide receiver spot and let's see if you can swim, learning a route tree and all the other, things that you have to learn as a wide receiver.
Yeah, what was your tweet? Hey, let's try Trevor Lawrence at right guard next.
Yeah. I mean, I'm being a jerk. I mean,
something like that.
That's who I am. That's who I am on Twitter. But I mean, like, it's I don't know. It's just, again, I think it's just because you, particularly when you cover the league for a really long time, and you get individuals, like I said, who come in, particularly from college, and there's always this sort of, there's always a little bit of arrogance there, because, I think they're coming in wanting to, do things and establish the culture the way that they did it and the way that they were successful in college. And that can work, absolutely, sometimes. But, I don't know, the NFL, it's just, I think there's this transition from college to the NFL where, particularly inside the locker rooms, the politics of power are completely different in the NFL than they are in college. In college, if you don't like how a player's performing, you bench them. If they're not fitting in your program, you figure out a way to get them into the transfer portal, or you just let them know that, hey, you're not going to play here, and if you want to get out, you need to get out. You come to the NFL, you're tied to guys financially. They're people with families. They're trying to, hang on and make livings. And the things that you do, you can't rub even one player the wrong way and expect that not to have reverberations. And you know what? This is an off season where I think we've learned that a little bit about, you got to be real careful with some of the tinkering that you do inside your locker room, because it can screw up the chemistry pretty fast. And don't piss off the wrong player, because guys like Deshaun Watson, which, look, obviously that broke differently for Watson than he thought, but there were a couple months ago where everybody was on Deshaun Watson's side in that whole mess. Aaron Rodgers, I mean, some of these people are talking about quarterbacks right now for a reason, because I think a lot of these quarterbacks are starting to make $35-40 million a year, and they're going, you know what? I don't have to sit here and just like it anymore. I can impress myself upon the situation and actually have to be heard because of financially where I sit now. And that's something the NFL has always approached as the quarterback salaries have started to balloon.
Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Charles joins us every Tuesday at 9 o'clock here on the show. Charles, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll react a little bit to what Charles had to say there and look at Urban Meyer in Jacksonville as well. Is this going to be as big of a disaster as it seems to look like right now? We'll talk about that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. This Friday, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game this Sunday night, you win a prize pack and a pair of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Your next chance to participate coming up on Friday morning at 9:45. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Ryan Porth here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Now, Joe, we brought this story up in the last segment with Charles. Travis Etienne selected by the Jaguars in the first round, their first pick after selecting Trevor Lawrence. And obviously, teammates at Clemson, Etienne was a great running back at Clemson, very productive during his time there. And over the weekend, minicamp has come and gone, and Etienne taking his reps at the wide receiver position in Jacksonville. What do you think of that? And look, I guess I understand when you hear Urban Meyer kind of talk about it a little bit, having Etienne play a bunch of different roles. He'll still line up in the backfield at times, but just wanting to get him on the field and play maybe in the slot as well, like Percy Harvin used to do. I mean, I suppose I can understand wanting to get a playmaker like Etienne on the field as much as you can, especially when you have James Robinson in the backfield as well. But to me, like coming in, drafting him in the first round, and then maybe potentially changing his position seems like a move that can end up in disaster.
Yeah, like if he comes in and either they try to switch him and it doesn't work out, or he just he's a split time at best with Robinson at running back, then I think you look at that pick and say, man, you could have done a lot of different things there. But I'm a little bit hesitant to. As much as I think Urban has done some real dumb things, this one to me reads, especially if you read his comments from minicamp. I mean, he said look, we know what he can do on the ground. Why not give it a look in May? And so I don't know that this is going to be there's a lot of fantasy out there, I think, about Urban Meyer being a complete train wreck as an NFL coach. And hey, if that's the case, it'll be entertainment for all. I'm still dubious of that because he is a good coach. He's a smart guy, and so I'm keeping an open mind on the Etienne thing. Like Charles said, like if they go into camp and that's where he's repping strictly, then it's like, yeah, that's a weird pick. 25 overall for that.
Yeah.
But I have my doubts that'll be the case. And look, he is a good weapon. I mean, it's basically it's like the opposite of Harvin. Harvin obviously was a receiver, and Urban came up with all these different ways to get him the ball. I mean, that was like when Harvin was in college, that was like some of the first times any of us had ever seen something called a jet sweep. Like a jet sweep? Yeah. What is a jet sweep? I mean, Percy Harvin is one of the first guys in college in football history to be a steady diet guy on that. And they'd line him up straight up in the backfield and just hand off to him at times. They'd move him all over the place. They wanted the ball in his hand. So now you got the running back who you're trying to do more in the slot and things like that. Hey, some of the best running backs in this league, as we know, do both very well at a high level. And Etienne's production as a pass receiver significantly upticked throughout his career at Clemson. So I know people looking at this and saying, "Oh, Urban," and people are going to jump on everything, and they should jump more on like the strength coach thing, the Tebow thing. I mean, I thought Charles made a great point about that. If you're in that locker room, you're like, "Really, Tebow, really?" But I don't really have an issue with giving this a strong look, because if you've got a guy who can do both very well, then to me that justifies taking him at 25.
Let's go back to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben text in, Urban Meyer isn't going to change his ways, so it just depends on how long Trevor Lawrence can keep him his job. If Urban keeps doing crazy stuff, maybe the Titans should try to trade Kevin Byard for Trevor Lawrence. I don't think that's going to work.
Okay, yeah, we're not talking about Bill O'Brien here. We're talking about Urban Meyer. Yet. So, yeah. Now, Bill O'Brien might make that trade.
Yes. I don't know. Does Urban have that much power yet in Jacksonville? Is that the way this thing's going to trend? I would think not.
I don't know. His dumb strength coach idea got slam dunk, so maybe not yet.
That is true. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Like to Charles's point, talking about how Urban better have a strong start. I mean, they do open up the season with Houston, so you talk about an opportunity to have a strong start. If you're Urban Meyer, might be able to win that first game, because I look at this Houston team, and my goodness, is that roster? It is rough. The quarterback situation right now, obviously, with Deshaun Watson's situation. I don't know what that's going to look like. They look like a team that could be pretty bad this season.
Yeah, like, Tyrod Taylor, if he's the quarterback, yeah, I mean, it's a 3-13 team, right? Something like that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
a 3-14 team. Oh, I'll give them 4-13.
Okay.
I'll give them 4-13. But again, we got to have Aaron Reese on at some point. Our Texans writer who picked the Jags to finish higher than the Titans in the division.
Yeah.
Like I gotta hear this.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joey from Gallatin texting in. Alvin Kamara has done well in the running back / receiver role. I don't think there's any question. He has.
Of course. Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
That's right now. And Le'Veon Bell, obviously, I think changed the position a little bit with what he did a few years ago in Pittsburgh. So, I have no working on that stuff, trying to hone your route running abilities, all that. That's great. I mean, if you're just going to use them in the slot, then to me, it's like, boy, I think you maybe could have gotten like you could have gotten like Elijah Campbell or something, Rondale Moore, for crying out loud. Rather than go with a running back, you're going to switch to a slot. But I think Travis Etienne is going to get plenty of carries too.
When we come back, we'll get back into the Nashville Predators. A tough loss in Game 1. Did the Game 1 loss change how you feel about this series against Carolina? We'll discuss that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
how do you balance not panicking, but knowing you got to do more?
Well, it's a long series. I think panic is not a very good word right now. I don't sense any panic in our game. We're a confident group. We've gone through some adversity this season, and so I'm very confident that we're gonna bounce back and have a really good game on Wednesday.
That was Predators forward Erik Haula after the game last night, discussing the loss, a 5-2 loss for the Predators in Game 1 against the Carolina Hurricanes. They're back at it tomorrow in Game 2 to try to even up this series, and we'll see whether or not they're able to make some adjustments and do that. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Joe, the interesting part was in the game last night, I thought in the first period, the Predators played pretty well in the first period. I thought it was an even period for the most part. Forsberg scores first. You're up 1-0. And then Teravainen makes a great play where I think you just got to tip your cap to him on that play. He ties the game, a great redirection. It's 1-1 at that point. But all in all, I thought if you're the Predators, you had to feel pretty good about the way you played in the first period and about the result heading into the second period. And then you come out in the second period and you go basically 8 minutes and you don't have a shot on goal, and Carolina starts to change the momentum around a little bit. Jordan Staal makes a great play. Erik Haula ties it up at 2 heading into the third, and then the wheels come off in the third period, and Carolina was just dominant. They started the game well, and it just looked like as that game went along, Carolina wore them down, and they got to their game, their style of play a little bit more in the second half of that game. I don't know how, if you're the Predators, you can try to get Carolina playing the way you played in the first period the whole time. As Chris Mason said earlier on the show, that is way easier said than done. But I think the formula in the first period, you were kind of going back and forth in terms of the physical play. I thought the Predators did a great job in the first period of shutting some things down at the blue line. They didn't give up a ton in terms of the middle of the ice, and that got away from them later in the game. The formula in the first period is going to have to be the formula the Predators follow if they're going to be able to compete in this series.
Right, and my question is, can you actually do that for a whole game against Carolina in the playoffs? I do think that – I think this is where location it probably matters some. I mean, I think probably Carolina got some energy from 12,000 people, and probably – the Preds will get the same when they're home. And I think that like those guys, a lot of these guys in this team who have been a part of many postseasons have talked about that in the past. I think it does matter to help the home team, especially in terms of energy. Because like in the third period, it looked like a much fresher team. Better, yes. Skilled, doing what they do, making it very hard for the Preds to do what they want to do. But also they looked fresher to me. So I don't know if the Preds can take that first period and duplicate it, but I would say that of the last 40 minutes of this game, a good 30 minutes of it were dominated by Carolina.
So the question is, did the game last night change the way you view this series? We had our poll question of the day yesterday where the winner on the poll question was the Predators winning the series in 6 or 7 games. I picked Carolina at 6. You picked Carolina at 7. Porth picked the Preds in 6. Did Game 1 change the way you view this series? That's our question. You can answer on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Sam text in, I don't think it changed my expectations. I had Carolina winning, but now I think we might be pressed to get more than one win in the series. The fact that they were able to camp out in our zone 5-on-5 and set up, and we couldn't even get set up on the power play, doesn't bode well. So, Joe, as you watched that game last night, did this change the way you view this series in terms of the Predators and their competitiveness in it?
Yeah, a little bit. And it's one game, and we've all seen playoff series in various sports that look like one thing and then they go to something else. But it looked a lot like the first 6 games between these teams in the regular season to me. There was too much of last night's game that looked too much like the first 6 games of the regular season. It's just not a good matchup for the Preds. And I still think that there's value in what they did. Well, there's value in getting to the playoffs for one thing, but there's value in what they did on the next to last regular season game with both of them with full lineups, and they at least had a full period of playing the way they want to play. But I came away from that series thinking that I was a little bit optimistic in saying Canes in 7.
Ryan Port, did last night change the way you view this series? You had the Predators winning this in 6 heading into it. It is just one game, and we see this happen a lot in the playoffs. You have one game. If the Predators turn around and win in game 2, all of a sudden it is mission accomplished. You've split in Carolina, and you're coming back home with a chance to go up 3-1 at that point. That's a lot easier said than done, obviously. Did last night's game change the way you view this series for the Predators?
Yeah, probably. I would say yes to that. I think the way that Carolina imposed their will in the final 2 periods was impressive on their part, and it was concerning on the Predators' part that, there was all this talk about the physicality and them being able to, hopefully punch Carolina in the mouth, and they tried their darndest to do that in the first period last night, and Carolina stood up to it. And as that game went along, Carolina looked to improve as each period unfolded. And if that's the version of Carolina that we're going to see every night against the Preds in this series, then yeah, that does change the way I view this series.
It's not changed much for me. I mean, I had Carolina in 6 coming in. And look, I think the Predators are going to make some adjustments. I said it before. I think the lineup's going to look different heading into game 2. And I think the Predators are going to find a way, especially I think about game 3. I don't know what the response for the Predators is going to look like in game 2. I think it's important that you come out in that first period and you try to get to your game as quickly as you can and force Carolina to react that way. But I do think, Joe, you brought up something that we've not talked a lot about today, and that is the crowd. I mean, there was 12,000 people in the building last night. It was a pretty obvious effect on Carolina. There was energy. That's pretty much all they talked about after the game last night, was having fans back in the building to that degree and how much of a difference they felt like that made. Well, that's going to be the same thing for the Predators coming up this weekend as well. Starting on Friday in Game 3, there are going to be 12,000 people in the building, and they're going to be at home. And as good as the environments were coming down the stretch, and we talked about the environment at Pekarine's game to close out the regular season, the environment in the playoffs is a different animal, and it's going to be pretty special. So I'm holding tight to the Carolina in 6. I think the Predators can find a way to get a couple of wins in this series. But I'll say this. I said, kind of heading into this series, I would be surprised if the Predators won. I wouldn't be shocked. I thought it was going to take a great effort from UC Saros in this series to get it done. Right now, after that game last night, it could take a superhuman effort from UC Saros in this series to get it done, and that's a whole lot to ask from your goaltender.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We've talked very little about Saros today. We've had a couple people on the text line. Someone asked, and I just texted them back, if this was an indication that the layoff hurt Saros. We've gone through the one goal, and I think you astutely pointed out that maybe he overcommitted a little bit, or I guess maybe undercommitted, thinking that a pass might be coming on the stall goal. But like the other 3 goals, I don't know what he's supposed to do.
Yeah,
and in fact, if he stops any of those, it's not superhuman; it's pure luck, right?
Yeah.
So I just Saros has to be great. But I don't even – he's not even the equation right now in terms of what happened last night. And I'm not sure – the Preds have to get to the point for him to matter, to be in position to stand on his head and steal games. I mean, they've got to – and this is where last night the kill was great. But the power play was so bad.
Yeah.
And that's been a big part of this turnaround, right? And I don't see how they come close if they don't start figuring out how to take advantage of those opportunities. It's just so hard to get things going against that team that when you get the man advantage, I mean, you've got to be in a position to take advantage of it. They couldn't set up last night. But I'd put Tolvanen in and try to set up and try to use what he brings to the table, because I think that the Preds are going to have to score, they're going to have to score multiple goals in any game they win.
Well, and to that point, Chris on the text line points out, he says, I hear people texting and calling, complaining about the power play. But to me, it's no different than years past. The power play has never been good as it should be heading into the playoffs. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you bring up a good point. The power play's not been great in the playoffs for the Predators as of late. And we've seen how difficult it is to win that way. Like, you've got to have your power play at some point step in there and be a difference. And quite frankly, like, when the margin for error is as small as it is with the Predators in this specific series and this matchup against Carolina, like, you've got to win the special teams battle. That's something the Predators have got to win moving forward, or I just don't think you give yourself that much of a chance in a series where I think it's pretty evident at this point Carolina is the better team. They are the better team than the Predators. I don't think that's a surprise by saying that. The number one seed, they've been dominant all season long. They are the better team. To counteract that, you need great goaltending, and you need to win in some of these smaller areas of the game. You've got to win the special teams battle. And I just look at that power play, and even with Tolvanen in there, like there's a lot of work to do on that power play just to set things up and get some movement. If you can't get that power play going, you just don't give yourself a chance in this series.
Yeah, that's how complete Carolina is. They're top five in both. I mean, they're good at everything, but the Preds power play bottomed out 2 years ago. Yeah. It was unwatchable 2 years ago. In fact, I don't even remember. Was it especially bad against Arizona? I don't think it did a lot, but like even then there was some progress. But this year there was a stretch where, to me, easily the best power play the Nashville Predators have consistently tried out since I've been around, and something that gave you hope that it could be different in this postseason. But you have to set up. You have to figure out a way to attack that kill because they're so aggressive. And then, to me, I think you want Tolvanen in that left circle.
Go to theGameNashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. This week it's buy one, get one free tickets to Beach Bend Park and Splash Lagoon. Beach Bend Park is your ticket to summer fun. Double your fun and double your savings with buy one, get one admission. 2 parks, 2 tickets for the price of one. Get yours now at theGameNashville.com. When we come back, we'll continue to get your thoughts on the Predators on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. We've got some tickets to give away for a Nashville SC game coming up this Sunday against Austin FC. Be caller 4 or caller 5 at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, and you can win some tickets to see Nashville SC take on Austin FC this Sunday coming up at Nissan Stadium, 615-737-1025. Joe, let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Kathlina texting in says, I can't believe after one game of a 7-game series, the sky is already falling. It was one game, and we have seen this team make adjustments. I will not write them off just yet. Calm down, all you chicken littles. This coming from Kathlina on the text line. I like it.
Come on, Kathlina. It's time to panic. This team will never win again. We know this. This is obvious. Look, in all seriousness, it's not time to panic, but I think last night we did see the difference in these teams. And to me, it looked a little too close to some of these other games we've seen between them.
I would agree. And that's something you've got to find a way to change if you're John Hines and the Predators moving forward. And we've talked about some lineup changes. Garland on the text line texting in says, Olivier and Yarncroke need to be out. I think with Yarncroke or with Olivier, we have the size, skill, and grit in the corner. What do you think about him saying that Yarncroke has to be out? I'm sure your eyebrows just went up. I saw your reaction on your face. Man, immediately. One bad game and Yarncroke's out.
Yeah, absolutely. Unforgivable. Listen, now Yarncroke, he does a lot. He does a lot. He's on everything, so he's not going to be out. But I will say, in all seriousness, we've talked about it. I don't think that line's getting enough attention for its lack of impact. That can't happen again. And that was one of the most surprising things to me because they've been so effective, but they just they have to take it. And I don't think they'll be, like, to C. Mace's point earlier, I don't think it's going to get messed with. You've had such a stretch of success from those guys, and this is one game. I don't think you mess with something that's not new, that's been so good. But, boy, they have got to – if there's anything I would point to, like an entity, a line, a pairing, or whatever, I'm pointing at that line saying you've got to be way better than this.
Corey in Clarksville says, history says to panic. You're 0-11 after losing game one in the series. As we talked about, I mean, that is a heck of a stat for this group. I don't get caught up in that stuff. I mean, that has nothing to do with this team, has nothing to do with this year. Now, do I think the chances are very high that they're going to come back and win this series? No, I don't. I mean, I took Carolina to win the series in 6 games before it even began, so I don't have a ton of confidence that the Predators are going to come back and win. But I don't think it's going to be because they're 0-11 after losing game one in the series. Like, eventually, that's going to stop at some point in this franchise. They're going to lose a game one somewhere along the way, and they're going to win a series. I don't know when it's going to happen, but those things that have happened in the past, I don't think have anything to do with what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat, and at some point that'll end. They'll lose a first game and win the series. This is not the ideal streak breaker opportunity.
It is not.
I would say. This is not the best possible streak breaker. It's interesting too. I believe as a franchise they are 7-2 when they win game one. I mean, I'm sure most franchises there's a pretty big difference if you look at the history of game one win or loss, but that is pretty. I mean, that's kind of an amazing stat.
It is. I mean, look. I mean, eventually you've got to find a way to dig yourself out. And I mean, the Predators, they've been down 0-2 a ton in series along the way, like old series against Detroit, their first ever playoff series. They did it again in 2008. They were down 0-2 to Pittsburgh in the Cup final, and they found ways to come back and tie it 2-2. It's just a tough climb, and that's what makes this next game so important. You get down 0-2, yeah, you're coming back home, and if you take care of business on home ice, it's 2-2, and it's a best of 3 after that. But if you're down 0-2 in a series, you got to win 4 out of the next 5. I mean, that's really hard to do at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if the Preds figure a way to get game 2, then we'll be right back to talking about their chances, and we'll be right back to talking about how the Canes have all this pressure as the favorite. You know, it's one game away. So that's the sunshiny Kathleen view. You know, it's you put together one good performance. Maybe you get a break, like I think the Canes got on their first goal last night, and you can change everything.
Agreed. And I'm interested to see what the lineup looks like heading into Game 2. I do think there will be some changes. I'm going to call my shot right now. Eric Gudbranson will not be playing in Game 2. That's the shot I'm willing to call.
Well, I mean, if you had a say, he would never play in this league again. So, but I think you're probably going to be right.
By the way, have we mentioned all show the pick to click? Looking back on what happened on pick to click yesterday.
I was trying to avoid that.
Okay.
No,
I'm coming for you, Joe.
Yeah,
I'm coming for you.
Ryan Porter strikes again. What's that? Up to 5
give me the
now.
Numbers.
Yeah, up to 5. Now you're still at 7. The listener's at 7. So Port's closed the gap a little bit. And at this point, I'm just so far gone with 2. I have no chance.
Called shot. This thing is going to be tied after Friday night.
Yeah, I like it. Porth confident he's tying things up by the end of the week.
You better hope so.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to get a whole bunch more opportunities. So, hey, I welcome the challenge. I embrace it.
Hey, at some point there's got to be a tiebreak.
You got to tell me about tonight, man, before the show's over.
All right, so I'm going to the Sounds game tonight. I'm taking some people from my Bible study group that I do. We're going to a Sounds game, and your boy is tossing out the first pitch tonight. I'm kind of nervous. Like, I've not thrown a baseball in a while. I've thrown some softballs. I've not thrown a baseball in a while. Now, I did used to be a high school pitcher, so I still have like somewhat level of confidence that I can put one over the plate. What I can't have happen is like a 50 Cent moment or a Chase McCabe moment out there where I let one go and things just go sideways. Like that, I can't have that happen tonight.
What was your pitching repertoire?
I had a nice little fastball, a knuckle curve, slider, and a change.
All right, man. You got to try to throw that slider or knuckle curve for a strike. Come on, be bold. And also, if you ground one, you're with your Bible study group. No swearing. So
well, that is true. I have to keep that in mind. I'll say this though: like if it would be my luck to like throw a knuckle curve, and whoever's going to be catching this thing for me tonight doesn't know about it, and I like injure a Nashville Sound, they never let me back again. I can't have that happen either. So I think I'm gonna take the nice, cool, 50-mile-an-hour fastball approach to it tonight.
Well, maybe when you throw it, you intend for it to be a fastball, but it's actually a curveball.
Maybe so.
It
get a little loft to
lends the shape of a curveball.
Well, hopefully there's going to be some video involved here to where we can see the results of this first pitch tonight.
I have been told there will be video.
There better be. There better be video.
We can grade this thing tomorrow on the show. There's a lot of pressure. I probably need to find me a baseball at some point this afternoon and just remember what it's like to throw.
Well, you can always be like Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel threw out the first pitch a few weeks ago at the Vandy, Tennessee game, and he missed the mark by quite a bit. But I think he was like, I was just brushing back the hitter, man.
That's right.
I mean, you can turn it into whatever sort of scenario you want.
I'll definitely have some excuses ready to go. That does it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode. Darren, Donica, Chase is coming up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.